Chapter 1434. As soon as Lin Xiao came back, she focused on the situation in her base. After all, the secret of the base had been announced, and the transformation was official. In other words, there was a lot of work to be done, so she hadn't heard any news from Wu Qingyue and Haiqing. Hearing this, he turned to look at Lin Feng, who was beside him. "What's going on?" Lin Feng said. "Old Wu is no longer the leader of Haiqing. He gave up his position." Lin Xiao stared at Wu Qingyue in surprise. Why? Why did he give up his position as the leader? As soon as she spoke, everyone's eyes turned to her. Her meaning was obvious. "Lin Xiao, is there a need? If you continue to be the leader, we shouldn't have too much of an impact on you and Haiqing." After a few seconds of silence, Lin Xiao still didn't understand. Even if the zombie army in her base was announced, the most impact on Haiqing would be on their cooperative relationship. If Haiqing wanted to protect itself, they could directly cut off their relationship with her base. Then wouldn't it be fine if both sides minded their own business? Could it be that the survivors of Haiqing wanted to attack her base? Unlikely, because their food lifeline was still in her hands. Unless those people cut off the food supply from her side, they wouldn't be so stupid as to attack her base. Wu Qingyue smiled and said, "Because then I can't come to you and little Tingting openly in the future. If the survivors of Haiqing restrict me as the leader, how boring would that be? Comparatively, my wife and children are more important to me, and I'm not the most important to them. Without me, they still have a base that I built. There's food and drink, and old Zhou is there." What he wanted was to be able to stay by this female zombie's side, that's all. If he was still the leader of Haiqing, considering the pressure of the survivors in the base, he wouldn't be able to freely interact with Lin Xiao. If he was a person with sole authority, he could completely ignore it. But he wasn't, he was a very democratic leader. Since it was impossible for the survivors of Haiqing to accept the base, he might as well just give up on it. In any case, he didn't really care much about power. Back then, he was only able to become the leader because he was the strongest and was pushed by everyone. Lin Xiao glared at him speechlessly. "Who's your wife? I haven't admitted it yet, okay? Can you not talk nonsense?" But in front of so many people, she couldn't argue with him. After all, it was just a personal problem. Right now, the most important thing was to deal with the matters in his base. "Fortunately, I planted a lot of catnip in the space and picked those black fruits. But it doesn't seem to be enough. Although the number of humans in our base has decreased a lot, it's still not enough. We have to go down and pluck some more. Moreover, this level 9 fellow liked strong prey. If it came out, it would be a huge threat. The first person it would look for would definitely be Xikong Chen or Dong Xiaowei. That's why we have to find a way to force it towards Huaxia instead of us." Lin Xiao had already guessed what Xiedong was going to do. Therefore, she wasn't surprised at all. She had already been thinking about how to lead this level 9 subterranean exotic beast to Huaxia to find trouble with Xikong Chen. As for the poisonous mist, Lin Xiao still had some black fruits that she had picked in the underground space in her space. After mixing it with her energy lake water and catnip, humans would not be affected by the poisonous mist after consuming it, just like the people she had brought into the underground space. That was to say, Big Red had found an antidote for her back then. It just so happened that the lake water in her space could increase the energy in these plants. Therefore, she only needed a little bit of it to solve the problem of a human's body being affected by the poisonous energy. If it didn't work, she still had catnip. Therefore, there were only two things that the base had to face. One was Xikong Chen in Huaxia, and the other was the problem that her base would have to face after announcing the existence of the zombie army. That hole has already collapsed. We have to find another hole to go down. Hearing that Lin Xiao wanted to go down and pluck the black fruits, Xiedong spoke up first. "Then we have to wait for them to mature before we can pluck them." Lin Xiao sighed. "Then we can only put this aside for the time being. Anyway, the poisonous mist won't spread to our base so quickly. And even if it does, everyone has the antidote, so we don't have to worry. Now let's talk about when this level 9 guy will come out. Moreover, you made Xikong Chen so angry this time. Maybe he doesn't plan to make a move on Haiqing and will make a move on us first." Lin Feng said, and glanced at Lin Xiao. This guy's troublemaking personality was really helpless. Lin Xiao curled her lips and said calmly, "It's better if he explodes. If he dares to come, then let him come. Anyway, I destroyed so many of his weapons, so we don't have to worry about not being able to beat them in firepower. Moreover, since we have already announced it, of course we will use the most direct method. Not only do we have to let Sikong Chen know that it's not easy to deal with us, but we also have to let the entire base know about this situation. Since her zombie base had already been exposed, then those who wanted to cause trouble should be prepared to face the zombie army." However, this was only Lin Xiao's temporary strategy. Of course, if she wanted to develop the base, she wouldn't be able to rely on zombies for many years. She had to think about the rapid development of humans after a few decades, or 100 years. When the day came when humans developed a zombie nemesis, then her base would also be in danger. That night, the aura of a level 9 beast appeared on the ground. This aura was the most powerful that everyone had ever felt, and its aura spread over tens of thousands of miles. Roar! A loud roar resounded, causing Sikong Chen, Dong Xiaowei, Lin Xiao, Wu Qingyue, Lan Lu, and the other level 8 and 9 metahumans and zombies to feel its provocative aura. That's right, it came to provoke them. With its roar, it marked this piece of land as its territory. In its territory, all living creatures must listen to it. This was an absolute order. After the beast's thunderous roar spread far and wide, the underground beasts around the major bases all turned around and ran in its direction. All of them abandoned their prey and turned around without a care in the world. Lin Xiao stood on the roof and looked in the direction of the roar. It's coming. At the same time, apart from her, the metahumans of level 7 and above in the other bases all revealed grave expressions. Sikong Chen was no exception. Chapter 1435. Take these level 9 exotic beasts for example. At their level, they were already used to their position as the one and only expert. If they sensed another expert of the same level as them, they wouldn't be able to tolerate the other party appearing in their territory. Just like the principle that two tigers cannot coexist on the same mountain unless it is a male and a female. So when this level 9 exotic beast came out and sensed that Sikong Chen and Dong Xiaowei were of the same level as it would launch an attack to get rid of them. Everyone in Haiqing and Haiqing already knew that this fellow was coming out, so they did not have much of a reaction. But Sikong Chen's expression changed. Why is it coming out? Isn't it supposed to stay underground? The aura of this level 9 underground exotic beast was very strong and domineering, and its aura was much stronger than his. His intuition told him that he was definitely no match for it. A sense of danger emerged in his heart. On the other side, the huge body of the level 9 exotic beast floated in the air. It slowly rose up, its mouth full of sharp teeth spitting out mouthfuls of poisonous energy. Its huge head moved left and right, sniffing with its nose, and a hesitant expression appeared in its cold eyes. The two directions it was looking in were the direction of Haiqing and Huaxia. This was because there were auras of the same level coming from both directions. The two directions were opposite, so it could only choose one to deal with first before dealing with the other. In Huaxia, Lin Xiao stood on the top of the tallest building in the base, with Lin Feng and the others standing behind her. Will it come in our direction? Lin Feng looked in the direction of the level 9 exotic beast's aura with a serious expression. The other party's aura was too strong, very wild. They could clearly sense it from thousands of miles away, and this was also intentional, because it wanted to use its own aura to mark its territory. Beasts all had this habit. Lin Xiao said expressionlessly, "Even if it doesn't come at the beginning, it will still come later. As long as there was still the energy of a level 9 arcanist here, it would not leave it alone." Lin Feng turned his head to look at Lin Xiao, and seeing her expressionless face, he knew that she could not think of a way to prevent this big guy from coming here. There was no way they could beat him now. If the level 9 leader of Qingshan Base and Sikong Chen worked together, they might have a chance of winning. However, that was also impossible. Lin Xiao lowered his head and rubbed his chin as he thought about it. There's only one way. We just don't know if we have enough materials. What is it? Everyone looked at her. Lin Xiao looked up and said to them, "Burn all the catnip we have so that the smell of catnip will spread." That guy didn't like this smell, so he would choose China first. But we won't be able to maintain it for long because there isn't much catnip left. The catnip she planted in her space grew several times faster than the catnip outside, but it wasn't enough. He had to think of a way to thoroughly subdue this level 9 subterranean exotic beast. It wasn't like he could chase Dong Xiaofei away, right? Previously, he had invited Dong Xiaowei over to deal with Xikong Chen. Now, he would attract even more troublesome underground beasts. Neither Lin Xiao nor Wu Qingyue were the kind of people who would throw away people after using them. "If we really can't do it, we can only fight it head-on," Wu Qingyue said. After all, even if they wanted to escape, this level 9 exotic beast could catch up to them in an instant if it wanted to. It was impossible for them to escape. Lin Xiao took out the first batch of catnip that Lu Tianyi had planted from her space and got Lin Feng to send someone to burn them on the roof. Thick smoke rose into the air as it burned. Wind metahumans, or zombies, controlled the wind to blow the smoke to the north. Not long after, the level 9 exotic beast in the distance moved its nose and sniffed in the direction of Universal Base. After sniffing for a while, it let out a deep roar. Woo! Then, it turned around and disappeared in the direction of China. The moment it moved, Xikong Chen and Huaxia instantly sensed its aura coming in the direction of Huaxia. Moreover, it was extremely fast, coming from the sky. Not good. "It's coming in our direction." Xikong Chen's expression immediately changed when he noticed the situation. On the other side, Lin Xiao and the others also heaved a sigh of relief. Sure enough, the catnip was useful. Although she wanted to wait for Xikong Chen's end, she didn't have the time. After all, after this level 9 exotic beast took care of Xikong Chen, the next one would be Dong Xiaowei. She went to ask Little Tung Tung, wondering if he had any thoughts. Little Tung Tung's intuition was super sharp. As long as he said something, it would be true. However, Little Tung Tung shook his head. "My intuition is just a rough guess. I don't have an accurate direction. But I have a feeling that we will be fine. Then we should be fine later on." What Little Tung means is that we will find a way to avert danger in the end. It's just that he doesn't know what it is, Wu Qingyue said after hearing Little Tung Tung's words. "If you want to know more, maybe we can find another person." Lin Xiao thought for a while and asked Duan want to find Lin Wenwen. When Lin Wenwen came over, he roughly knew what she wanted to say. "Do you want to ask about the level 9 exotic beast?" Everyone nodded. "I'll give it a try." Lin Wenwen narrowed his eyes and slowly glanced at everyone present. However, no images appeared in their minds. The atmosphere couldn't help but become a little tense. Because they couldn't find a way, they could only fight to the death with that level 9 exotic beast. But just thinking about it, they knew they couldn't beat it. One must know that those underground exotic beasts could tear human mutants apart. There was no chance of winning at the same level. Lin Xiao sighed. She looked up and leaned back on the chair. She couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. Sigh, if only a god who can tame beasts appeared at this time. How good would it be to tame this big beast? Wu Qingyue smiled speechlessly. "That's only in your dreams." Lin Feng said expressionlessly, "If there's such a person, even I want to kneel to him." Everyone turned their heads and looked at him silently. Lin Xiao. "No, brother. You don't have to kneel. I'll kneel." Everyone turned their heads again. They suddenly didn't know how to describe this pair of siblings. "No, you two don't have to kneel, because that person is your son, nephew." At this moment, Lin Wenwen suddenly held her forehead with one hand and lowered her face. She raised her other hand and said aloud. Everyone turned their heads to look at her in unison. Then, they looked at the direction she was pointing at and looked at Little Tung Tung, who was in Lin Xiao's arms. Little Tung Tung's two big round eyes were wide open. "Huh? What does it have to do with me?" Chapter 1436. Lin Xiao looked at Ting Ting blankly, then at Lin Wenwen. She suddenly understood something. "What did you see?" Lin Wenwen stood up, walked to her, and picked up Ting Ting. Ting Ting looked at her curiously. "Auntie, what did you see?" Lin Wenwen smiled at him and said, I saw you sitting on the head of a huge monster. Then she turned to Lin Xiao and asked, did that level 9 monster have 2 short and thick horns on its head? It looked like a bull's horn, and there were bone spurs from the back of its head to its back. There were also spikes at the corners of its eyes, and they were very big. Only Lin Xiao had seen that level 9 monster before, so Lin Wenwen asked her directly. Hearing her description, Lin Xiao nodded. Indeed, there were horns and spikes on its head and the corners of its eyes. The back of its head, neck, back, and tail were all covered with sharp bone spurs. That's right. Thinking about what she said about seeing Tingting sitting on the head of that monster, Lin Xiao looked at Tingting and couldn't help but say, if you saw him sitting on that big guy's head, he would probably be like a flea. Tingting, Lin Wenwen, everyone. Is she his real mother? So, why is it you again? Tingting, what relationship do you have with those underground monsters? Xiao Lily couldn't help but be the first to speak. She looked at little Tingtung, looking at it with puzzlement and curiosity. Not only could this kid scare those level 7 and 8 monsters, but he could even suppress a level 9 monster. That was a little strange.
Why?
He was clearly a half-human, half-zombie child born from a zombie and a human. If he was affected, shouldn't it be those zombies? Why would it affect these underground exotic beasts of unknown origins? Tingting looked left and right and saw that everyone was looking at him like he was an animal in a zoo. He shrugged and said, how would I know? I also want to know what's going on. After all, Daddy and Mommy don't have the genes of these monsters. Why would these monsters react so strongly to me? Lin Wenwen hugged him and bounced him up and down. Maybe it has something to do with your ability. By the way, you haven't officially awakened your arcana yet, right? Little Tung Ting nodded. Not yet. Lin Xiao looked at Xiao Tingting thoughtfully and said, Xiao Tingtung has not awakened yet, but he already has such an ability. Then, if he awakens in the future, will he be able to dominate the world? Du Yuanxing, who was in the corner, suddenly asked. Everyone. Why does it sound a little stupid? However, Tingting said, don't have such high expectations of me. I'm just a baby. Lin Wenwen pinched his little face, amused. Whose baby would dare to sit on a level 9 exotic beast's head? Little Tingtung revealed a curious look at her. So strange. Why don't I feel anything at all? Is what you saw real? To be honest, he didn't feel anything for that big guy at the 9th level. He didn't have any premonition, so what was going on? Lin Wenwen said to him, you might be the reinforcements sent by the heavens. There is still hope for humanity. Meanwhile, in Haicheng, a tall man wearing a leader's cape stood on top of a building. He lowered his head slightly, the brim of his military cap covering his eyes. Yingyue, Lei Cheng, and Zhou Shui and the others from Haicheng stood beside him. Everyone looked anxious and uneasy, but they forced themselves to calm down and control themselves. At this moment, the tall man's face moved slightly and he finally said, it left. The moment he spoke, everyone looked at him. Left? What do you mean? Zhou Shui immediately asked. However, the man only lowered his head again and didn't say anything else. He was still unwilling to show his eyes and kept his vision within a small range. Yingyue thought for a moment and exchanged glances with Lei Cheng. She then said to Zhou Shui, our leader said that the level 9 fellow went in another direction. It didn't come to our side. Hearing her words, everyone from Haicheng immediately looked happy. Really? It went to Huaxia? They also knew that the level 9 exotic beast judged it based on the habits of wild beasts. It was unacceptable to have an existence as powerful as itself in its own territory. Therefore, it would hunt or expel them. Then it naturally only had 2 targets, so it wouldn't come here. That meant it went to the other side. Yingyue thought for a moment and said, maybe, but we can't be sure yet. We need to send someone over to take a look. Now that the base was no longer surrounded by those exotic beasts, they were much more relaxed. Next, they just had to think of a way to deal with the poisonous energy fog. Just like in Huaxia, without an antidote. The first thing they had to do was isolate the energy gas, so Haicheng was now mass-producing filter masks. These masks were also infused with the lake water energy and catnip provided by Haiching. After receiving the news that the level 9 exotic beast wouldn't be coming here for the time being, everyone felt relieved, but they still didn't celebrate too early. After all, if it got rid of Huaxia and Xigongchen, its next target would still be Dong Xiaowei. Although we can indeed be safe for the time being, but actually, the people from Haiching were already looking at Dong Xiaowei with a strange look in their eyes. But he had come here to help them, after all. They were already thinking of ways to ask him to leave without harming their relationship. It would be even better if he left voluntarily. Yingyue and the others weren't stupid. How could they not know what the people from Haiching were thinking? Since he didn't want them to stay, and their mission was considered completed, there was no point in staying here anymore. Don't worry, we'll leave here tomorrow. Yingyue suddenly turned around and looked at the people from Haiching. He said straightforwardly. Zhou Shihui and the others were taken aback, then revealed awkward and complicated expressions. After all, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of people in the base, they had to ask him to leave no matter what. The people from Haiching heaved a sigh of relief, while the people from Huaxia were tense, as if they were facing a great enemy. Roar. A giant beast almost 1,000 meters long appeared in the sky above Huaxia, and a strong and violent pressure descended. Its size was several times larger than when it was in the underground space. Now, it was like a huge beast in the sky, casting a huge shadow. At the same time, all the underground exotic beasts from all over the country rushed here in groups like a tide. The survivors of Huaxia were so scared that they wanted to escape from the base, but the gates were closed. Ordinary people couldn't get out, but many ability users directly jumped over the walls. But the outcome of going out was to die in the tide of beasts outside the base. There was still a chance of survival in the base, but those who ran out were all going to die. Chapter 1437. A large number of subterranean beasts had gathered outside Huaxia's base, driving away all the zombies and beasts on the ground. No humans in Huaxia's base could leave, not even rank 7 metahumans like Han Xiao and the other rank 7 metahumans. That was because the rank 8 subterranean beasts outside the base would attack anyone who tried to leave if a slightly stronger one appeared. After the Class 9 alien beast's roar, its aura and pressure dropped. Many of the weaker humans in the base directly suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. Blood gushed out of their eyes, nose, and mouth. Their eyes widened as they fainted. What should we do? Wei Haichao stood behind Xigongchen and looked at him. Actually, the reason why he asked this question was to remind Xigongchen that it was time to act. He was the only rank 9 metahuman here, and only he had the strength to fight. If he did not act, the entire Huaxia's base would be flattened by these subterranean beasts. However, Xigongchen only raised his head and looked at the giant beast that covered the sky, frowning without making a sound. He was unmoved. Wei Haichao turned his head and looked at Han Xiao, and their gazes dimmed slightly. Seeing Xigongchen staring at the giant beast above him, Han Xiao suddenly turned around and was about to leave. Wei Haichao asked him, "Where are you going?" Han Xiao turned his back slightly and said, "We still have some weapons to deal with these beasts. I'll arrange for them to be used. Even if we can't deal with the one above us, can't we deal with the ones on the ground?" After saying that, he directly turned around and left without asking for orders from Xigongchen. At this time, Xigongchen finally said, "Prepare the cannons and let everyone retreat to the underground base." Understood. Wei Haichao nodded and immediately turned to look at his deputy behind him. His deputy immediately turned around and hurriedly left with a few people. Xigongchen clenched his fists and lightly tapped his feet. His entire body flashed upwards, and at the same time, a huge purplish-red fireball began to descend from the sky. Roar! The giant beast raised its head and looked at the dazzling fireball above its head, a trace of disdain flashing in its eyes. It turned its head and looked at Xigongchen, who had appeared in the sky not far away. Xigongchen looked at it. One of his hands was raised, and his 5 fingers were spread open, as if he was holding something up. At this moment, he suddenly pulled it down, and with a flip of his hand, he smashed it towards the huge beast. Whoosh, boom, boom. The huge fireball above flashed, and in the next second, it suddenly appeared on the back of the beast's neck. Boom! It smashed into the beast's neck. The giant beast didn't dodge or evade, and was directly smashed. Just as Sikong Chen and the giant beast were fighting in the sky, an alarm sounded in China's base. This kind of siren was very special. It was different from the kind that usually sounded when enemies were attacking. What does this alarm mean? Someone looked in the direction of the alarm with a confused expression. This alarm. When the large number of soldiers guarding the wall heard this alarm, they all revealed a stunned expression for a moment. Then, they seemed to have thought of something and turned around to retreat. Retreat. Retreat now. The officers in the army suddenly gave the order and quickly led the people to the underground shelter in China's base. After the alarm sounded, the soldiers in the various regions of the base began to organize the survivors to retreat into the base. They opened up several underground tunnels for the survivors to escape into. In the sky, when Sikong Chen's first attack began, everyone looked up at the huge beast that was blown up by the fireball. However, even though its neck had exploded, its entire body was still floating steadily in the sky without any abnormal movements. Sikong Chen's face immediately sank because he realized that his attack had no effect on this level 9 giant beast. Even if it was also a level 9 exotic beast, the opponent was completely immune to ability attacks. After the raging flames and thick smoke slowly dissipated, the unharmed head of the giant beast was revealed. Its pair of huge eyes looked at Sikong Chen coldly, and it even blinked slightly. Then, it opened its huge mouth towards Sikong Chen and let out an earth-shattering roar. Roar! The momentum of this roar was not on the same level as the previous roar. Many people on the ground directly vomited blood and fell to the ground. This time, they were no longer unconscious. Everyone's legs went soft. It didn't matter if they were still on the ground or had already run into the shelter. They all fell to the ground. After more than 10 seconds, someone slowly got up. He looked at the people around him who had fallen to the ground with a pained expression and then touched the noses of those who were no longer moving. As expected, many of them were dead. Great fear, despair, and confusion filled the people who were still conscious. They could only rely on their instinctive desire to save themselves, dragging their injured bodies into the shelter with difficulty. Because of this roar, most of the people on the ground had already lost a third of their lives. Sikong Chen, who was standing in front of the giant beast, was directly pushed 1,000 meters away by the roar. Pooh! When he stopped, he vomited a mouthful of blood uncontrollably. He no longer had the imposing aura from before and seemed much more dispirited. This was the giant beast's attack, and it was an area of effect attack, treating everyone indiscriminately. Even the densely packed underground beasts outside the base all crouched down reflexively. Apart from China, which was too close, the humans and creatures from other bases within a few thousand miles felt their hearts palpitate. Moreover, as soon as the giant beast made its move, both sides immediately knew who was stronger. Sikong Chen was not its opponent at all. Although they were of the same level, their strength was not on the same level. After the giant beast finished roaring, it blinked its two large glass-like eyes and happily swung its tail. Hew! Hew! Its tail that was a few hundred meters long swung left and right, sweeping up the airflow that immediately formed a hurricane. Sikong Chen raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His tough face under the brim of the hat revealed a fierce and ruthless expression. With a flash, he disappeared from where he stood and reappeared on the back of the gigantic beast. Roar! The giant beast immediately turned around and stared at him when he appeared on its back. Its two large eyes were still calmly staring at Sikong Chen, as if it was still waiting for Sikong Chen's next attack. Sikong Chen did not disappoint it. He raised both of his hands above his head. Then, a huge high-temperature energy fireball appeared above his head, but this time, it wasn't just one, but countless of them appeared in the sky. Like a meteor shower, they rushed towards the giant beast. At this time, Wei Haichao and the others on the ground were holding their chests, dragging their injured bodies to command many soldiers to prepare to activate a large weapon base. Base A activation complete. Base B activation complete. Base C activation complete. Base Z activation complete. Request for energy boost. After hearing the final request for energy boost, Wei Haichao immediately shouted, "Begin energy boost." Chapter 1438. At this moment, large cannon-like weapons rose up from 26 different locations in the Huaxia base. The muzzles were 0.5 meter in diameter and 5 meters long. The metal bases were buried deep in the ground. After Wei Haichao gave the order while holding his chest, the operators immediately adjusted the muzzles to the sky. After reporting the preparation work, they received Wei Haichao's order and pressed a red button. Boom! More than 20 muzzles immediately shot a hot red line upward. These lines collided with each other when they were high up in the sky. It was like a cage, trapping the beast inside. Roar! Seeing Sikong Chen throwing a bunch of fireballs down, the giant beast only raised its head to take a look. Suddenly, it opened its mouth wide and sucked. A strong suction force appeared in its mouth. The countless fireballs that Sikong Chen threw down melted and converged above the giant beast. Then, all of them rushed into its mouth. How is this possible? Sikong Chen saw that his level 9 fire attack was directly swallowed into the giant beast's stomach. He also had a dumbfounded expression on his face. That was his fire ability. Those fireballs weren't ordinary fire. The temperature of those fireballs was over 1,000 degrees. When they hit the ground, they would explode into a huge crater, melting and evaporating everything around them. In any case, he was a 9th-grade fire ability user, especially since the heat energy in the fireball was borrowed from the sun. Simply put, his fireball was a solar fireball that was magnified 1,000 times. When it hit the ground, it would be similar to a meteorite. But now, his high-temperature fireballs were actually sucked into the giant beast's stomach. Although he knew that these underground exotic beasts were immune to energy, what the hell were they eating now? However, when he saw more than 20 red light lines suddenly erected in the base, his confidence was shaken. Could this cannon really kill this level 9 fellow? He knew that Wu Qingyue's lightning energy could cause these underground exotic beasts to react and injure them. As for this cannon, it was designed and built by someone long ago. This cannon was not used to attack. In fact, it was a weapon used for defense that could destroy indiscriminately. This was to be used at the last moment, at the very last moment. In the past, Sikong Chen didn't think that this would be of any use. However, he never expected that a level 9 exotic beast would appear and come looking for Huaxia. The spies of the other bases were observing the situation in Huaxia from afar. At the same time, they were constantly sending back intelligence. The Zhou Shihui and Haiqing didn't look very happy when they saw the miserable state of Huaxia. This was because what they saw was the deaths of most of the people in China. They saw the despair and return of humans. They were also thinking about whether their base would end up like China. It was as if the fox was going to grieve for the hare that was about to die. Although Huaxia was their sworn enemy, they were still humans of the same race. The extinction of the human race was not what everyone wanted to see. Fortunately, there was Wu Qingyue in Sea City. Fortunately, Wu Qingyue had taken a fancy to the leader of Universal Base, Lu Tianyu. Fortunately, Lu Tianyu had a miraculous son. Otherwise, they would really be in despair. In this way, all the officers in Sea City or the cadres in charge of the base wouldn't dare to touch Universal Base. After all, it was a zombie base with 3 layers of zombies inside and 3 layers outside. Moreover, they had also grasped the weakness of the giant beast. However, only a few old cadres in Sea City knew about this. It was also because Wu Qingyue trusted them that he revealed the news to them. However, the other bases didn't know. After Lan Lu saw the situation in Huaxia, his brows also furrowed tightly. On the other side, Du Kunqing also looked at the news from Huaxia with a heavy expression. Even without his subordinates collecting information, he roughly knew that the situation in Huaxia wasn't optimistic. They could feel the commotion from thousands of miles away. One could imagine what kind of devastation Huaxia was suffering in front of the giant beast. If Wu Qingyue had broken through to level 9, he might be able to temporarily join forces with Xigongchen to deal with this level 9 exotic beast. Xigongchen alone doesn't have much hope. Now it seems that our previous expectations were still too high. It's not that this hope isn't small, it's that it's too slim, he said with a sigh. Although it might be a bit difficult for Wu Qingyue and Xigongchen to join forces, humanity was now facing a great disaster. Their personal grievances could also be temporarily put aside for the time being. Then will Qingshan Base let their leader go over to help Huaxia? Black Dragon Base's current deputy leader stood next to Du Quanqing and asked. Du Quanqing said, Lan Lu isn't someone who doesn't know what's important. He will definitely bring his leader over, but it's still a problem whether the two of them can kill this giant beast together. Qingshan Base's Dong Xiaowei was a physical type. It wasn't a problem for him to destroy a mountain with one punch, but this level 9 exotic beast wasn't an ordinary mountain. Not only could it withstand magic attacks, it could also withstand physical attacks. It should be said that physical attacks didn't have much effect on it. Thinking about its thick skin and flesh, it was just like those monsters in American blockbusters. It was very difficult to deal with. At this time, Wu Qingyue received a secret letter for help. The location of the letter was in Huaxia. Lin Xiao curiously sat opposite him with Xiao Yunlong in his hand, holding the letter given to him by Xiao Yunlong. Look for you? Then give you the medicine that improves your strength in Huaxia and let you temporarily break through to level 9. Then join forces with Xigongchen and Dong Xiaowei to destroy this level 9 exotic beast? Who is this? Wu Qingyue stood by the window with his arms crossed in front of his chest. He looked back at her with a faint smile and said, Maybe it's the person who sent the news to Haiqing. Previously, someone had secretly sent Xigongchen's plan to him, and when Kong Qingming went to save Li Yuehe, the other party directly let him in and took him away. These were all arranged by their internal people. Now, they probably wanted him to help protect Huaxia Base. After all, there were still more than 1 million humans. Oh. Now that 1/3 of them had been removed, there were probably less than 700,000 people alive in Huaxia. Do you think I should go or not? Wu Qingyue looked at her and asked with a smile. Lin Xiao shrugged and said, Up to you. They're looking for you, so you can do whatever you want. For them to think of this method, it's probably their last hope. Because Wu Qingyue's lightning attribute could injure those underground exotic beasts, only his ability might be of some help to that level 9 exotic beast. Chapter 1439. Wu Qingyue thought about it and said, I don't mind helping the other people in China, but I don't want to work together with Xigongchen. In that case, I might as well join forces with you. Your special ability is also somewhat harmful to those Earth realm exotic beasts. Even if Xigongchen is rank 9, he's still useless. There's no need to work with him. When Lin Xiao heard what he said, his expression was slightly stunned. Puzzled, he said, You mean you're going to save the Chinese survivors, and you're going to bring me along? What does that have to do with me? Wu Qingyue looked at her and smiled. This is also for the future of your base. Think about it, we still have Tingting. He's the great killer against that level 9 exotic beast. If you work together with him, you'll be able to subdue him. If you can subdue it, then China won't have a reason to deal with your base in the future. At least for the next 10 to 20 years, they won't come looking for trouble with your base. Otherwise, they would be biting the hand that fed them. If that's the case, then don't blame me for being impolite. I know what you're thinking, but I don't think there's a need. Let's not talk about how many of them will survive after being ravaged by the beast. Even if there are survivors, they'll suffer heavy losses. They won't be able to recover for at least 10 to 20 years. Why should I be afraid of them? Lin Xiao shrugged. She just thought it was troublesome. There was no need for her to go, so why bring her along? Then if you don't go, are you going to let me bring Tingting alone? Wu Qingyue looked at her and asked. Lin Xiao immediately objected. Impossible. Then you don't have to worry about me going alone? What if I don't make it back? At least with Tingting, there was a high chance they could take care of the beast. Even if they couldn't kill it, they could at least subdue it. But there were so many people in China, they couldn't just watch them die. They were all humans, they couldn't just watch so many people die. Lin Xiao was silent for a while, then sighed and turned to look at Tingting. What do you think, Tingting? Tingting sat in Wu Yueling's embrace, his two little hands crossed in front of his chest. He was originally watching the two of them discuss, when Lin Xiao suddenly asked him. He replied, Yeah, I'm fine with it. But if you bring me to Dad, you'll have a higher chance of winning. Also, I'm very curious about what Ani said. I wonder how I subdued that big monster. In that case, let's go take a look. Lin Xiao pursed her lips and agreed to Wu Qingyue's request. Originally, with little Tingting here, she was not afraid of being found by that huge beast. However, she knew that Wu Qingyue would not reject her request and ignore the lives of so many people. Therefore, although Lin Xiao was reluctant, she had already agreed in her heart. Wu Qingyue saw that she agreed after only a few words of objection. He walked over with a smile and sat down beside her. At the same time, he held her face in his hands and said, I knew that even if you didn't agree verbally, you would still go with me in your heart. Lin Xiao calmly pushed his hand away and said, If you want to go, I can go with you. However, he had to give them one condition, and that was to remove Sikong Chun from his position as the leader. This can be considered as payback for all the trouble they've caused me. There was a price to pay for asking her to help them. She would not help the enemy out of kindness. Sikong Chun had been sending people to attack her before, so she had to settle the score with them. After she pushed his hand away, Wu Qingyue used his finger to hook a strand of her long hair that was hanging in front of her chest. He smiled and said, Of course, I think the same as you. I'm not helping them for nothing. Little Tingting couldn't help but roll his eyes when he saw his father saying something serious and moving his hand to pick up his mother's hair. Wasn't it hard to be careful in broad daylight? There were children here. As if she had heard little Tingting's thoughts, Lin Xiao pulled her hair back and glanced at him. Just say what you want to say. Don't touch me. Don't lead children astray. After saying that, she turned her head and glanced at the two children next to her. However, little Tingting looked up at the ceiling and said, Yeah, I didn't see anything. Right, Lingling? Lingling looked at him blankly, then at Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao. She wanted to say that she saw it, but little Tingting winked at her. Was he telling her to pretend that she didn't see it? After seeing the two children's reaction, Wu Qingyue smiled and said to Lin Xiao, They're so smart, they won't learn bad things. If they didn't learn bad things in this aspect, it would be hard for them to find a wife in the future. That afternoon, Lin Xiao held a meeting with everyone to discuss the matter of going to China to help. After all the major bases had expressed that they would go over to help deal with the underground beasts. Although this was a zombie base, they didn't ignore their strong combat power. The most important thing was that Wu Qingyue came to the base. Lin Feng and the others expressed that it was fine to help them in the long run, but they still had to deal with Sikong Chun. However, they still had to deal with Sikong Chun, so if China wanted their help, they would have to give up Sikong Chun in exchange. The other party didn't seem to have much of a problem with this condition and agreed very quickly. Seems like he didn't like Sikong Chun for a long time. Lin Xiao couldn't help but say, after seeing the other party's reply. Since the other party has agreed, when are you guys leaving? Lin Feng looked at her and asked. As soon as possible. Right now, China's enhanced weapon has completely angered the level 9 giant beast. If we go a little later, there's nothing left to save in China. Let's go now. Lin Xiao sighed, stood up and walked out. After leaving the conference hall, she went up to the rooftop and saw Wu Qingyue standing straight on the edge of the rooftop platform, looking straight to the north. The wind on the rooftop made his military uniform flutter. He was only wearing an ordinary military uniform. After losing his title and position as Sea City's leader, he didn't wear a leader's uniform anymore. Lin Xiao walked behind him and said, Let's go. After saying that, she jumped onto the platform and disappeared from the rooftop with Wu Qingyue. Lin Feng and the others stood by the window of the conference room and looked outside. He said, China has suffered a great loss this time. I hope they will know their place without Sikong Chun. Qiu Lily sat in her seat and leaned forward. She placed one hand on the table and supported her chin. She said lazily, Since he wants to know our secrets so much, let's just let him know. Anyway, those human bases can't even take care of themselves now. We can also develop in peace for a few years. After this incident, the strongest China would no longer be the strongest. Without Wu Qingyue, there was nothing to worry about in Sea City. Although Qingshan base had few people, they had Dong Xiaowei. Fortunately, the secret of their base was the same as the base for all living beings. It wouldn't be long before it was exposed. Moreover, Qingshan base had to move to the Central Plains. After all, the environment in the northwest was too bad. It was better to build a base closer to other bases. That way, they wouldn't be so tired when they helped each other. Chapter 1440. Apart from Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue, many people from other bases were also approaching Huaxia. However, they were only watching from afar and did not dare to approach. That was because the giant beast was going berserk. The entire Huaxia base was now the center of the storm. Roar, roar. The giant beast roared angrily above Huaxia after being hit by the solar energy gathered by the cannon. At the same time, it flew even higher than before. It flew completely out of the range of the cannon beam. Its huge body flipped in the air and at the same time, it roared loudly at Huaxia from time to time. Every time it roared, a wave of spatial tremors would spread to the ground. The tremors would cause everyone below to vomit blood or suffer internal injuries, whether they were ordinary people or metahumans. The metahumans were still fine, but the ordinary people were in a much more tragic state. Leader, release the energy shield. Only your energy shield can block its soundwave attack now. Wei Haichao appeared near Xigong Chen anxiously and shouted to him. Rank 9 metahumans had their own protective shields, which could more or less offset the soundwave attack of this rank 9 alien beast. However, Xigong Chen did not intend to use his energy shield. He ignored Wei Haichao's words and stood on the other side of the building, looking up at the giant beast. No one knew what he was thinking. His attacks were completely useless against the giant beast. Only the cannon's attack was effective against it. However, the cannon's attack mode consumed a lot of energy cores, and it needed time. He ignored Wei Haichao's request and ordered again. Prepare the cannon to attack again. Leader. Seeing that Xigong Chen did not care about the lives of the survivors in the base and only wanted to attack the giant beast, Wei Haichao called out to him with some disappointment. Now, the survivors in the base had been roared by the giant beast several times. Most of the ordinary people were basically dead. The remaining ones did not die, but they had already suffered serious internal injuries. They had been shaken. Shut up. The cannon can attack it. I don't believe we can't kill it if we hit it a few more times. Wei Haichao's shout made Xigong Chen angry. He turned around and shouted at him with a ferocious face. Wei Haichao was stunned by his shout. He looked at him silently for a moment, then suddenly turned around and left. Report, we still need 30 more minutes. At this time, the commander in charge of operating the cannons ran over and reported to Xigong Haomin. What? That's too long. When Xigong Chen heard that they would have to wait for another 30 minutes, he immediately became angry. But, leader, we can't fire the cannons if we don't have enough energy, the commander said weakly. The sky was getting darker and darker. It had been almost 5 hours since the giant beast appeared in the sky of Huaxia. In these 5 hours, it had already caused 70% of Huaxia's humans to vomit blood and die. Currently, there were less than 400,000 survivors and metahumans still alive, and all of them were heavily injured. Just as the sun set, the gigantic beast in the sky suddenly began to roll around frequently. However, because it was too high up, its figure seemed much smaller, and its movements were not very clear. Look, that huge beast seems to be rolling. But someone still noticed it. What's going on? What was it doing? It began to spin in circles. Why is it spinning in circles? After the gigantic beast rolled a few times in the sky, it suddenly began to spin in a huge circle. As it spun in circles, a gust of wind also began to spin along with it. The gigantic beast began to spin faster and faster, and the speed of the wind also increased. In less than a minute, a giant tornado began to form in the sky, and a violent hurricane descended from above. The rotating force of the wind gradually formed a strong suction force, and everything on the ground was sucked up. The area of the tornado grew larger and larger. Its diameter was at least 300 meters wide, and the center was more than 100 meters wide. Not good. Such a large tornado is coming down. The gathering point of the cannons will be destroyed. Seeing such a large tornado descending from above, everyone in the base was immediately worried that the cannon's defense would be blown away. The gigantic beast above their heads was spinning so fast that it was almost impossible to see its giant body. They could only see an increasingly large tornado pressing down with an aura of destruction. It seemed like it wanted to overturn the entire Huaxia base and raze it to the ground. What should we do? Looking at this aura and power, if it really descends, I'm afraid that the entire area within a few kilometers of the inner region will be swept clean. Han Xiao appeared beside Wei Haichao at this time, and frowned as he looked at him nervously. Wei Haichao turned his head and asked the assistant beside him, "How much longer until the cannons can continue?" The assistant looked at his watch and said, "There's still 16 minutes. Looking up at the giant tornado again, it was descending very quickly, and it would probably only take a few minutes for it to descend. They couldn't wait that long. Wei Haichao looked down at Xigong Chen beside him and suddenly said to Han Xiao, "Tell everyone to retreat to the underground shelter. Let's retreat as well." They couldn't wait for more than 10 minutes, and even if they waited for more than 10 minutes, even if the cannons hit the gigantic beast, they wouldn't be able to kill it immediately. Also, they wouldn't be able to destroy this tornado. Therefore, they could only hide underground and let the ground resist this giant tornado for them. Lin Xiao and the others could see this tornado from tens of kilometers away. Wow, such a big tornado. Was it caused by that level 9 beast? It's going to blow down the entire Huaxia base. Lin Xiao stood on the top of a mountain, looking at the giant tornado in the distant horizon that connected the two poles of heaven and earth, and couldn't help but say, "Looking at the news, they have evacuated all the refugees to the underground shelter, and now their army is also retreating." However, there were a lot of people who were roared to death by this level 9 underground beast before. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed by it with a few roars. Is this guy's roar the sound wave of death? Wu Qingyue said from the side, with a speechless expression. Its roar is very powerful. Lin Xiao narrowed her eyes and continued, "I actually can't get close to it in my current state." She was afraid that it would roar at her again, lest it awaken Lu Tianyu's zombie instincts. Why? Wu Qingyue looked at her expression and knew that she wasn't joking. Lin Xiao said to him, "Because its roar will affect the instinctive consciousness of the zombie in my body." When Wu Qingyue heard this, he frowned for a moment. "You mean it will awaken Lu Tianyu's zombie instincts in your body?" Lin Xiao nodded. Wu Qingyue's frown deepened. Chapter 1441. Hearing Lin Xiao say that the giant beast would let Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness out of her body, Wu Qingyue's expression darkened. "Why didn't you say so earlier? Then why did you follow me?" He knew that there was such a danger, but he still followed her. Lin Xiao looked at him indifferently and said, "Why can't I come? I can avoid it for a while, but do I have to hide from it forever? Besides, would I let you bring Tingting here and leave you alone?" In fact, there were several reasons for her to come. Not only was she worried about Wu Qingyue or Tingting, but she also wanted the giant beast to call out Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness. After all, she didn't seem to be able to make Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness wake up, so she needed external help. Anyway, she had to get rid of this hidden danger sooner or later, so it was better to get rid of it as soon as possible so that it wouldn't suddenly wake up in her body. Therefore, she came along to deal with this matter while she was at it. Wu Qingyue didn't have his usual relaxed smile. He frowned deeply. "But if you suddenly become a zombie in the middle of a battle, can you still control yourself?" She was right. In the current situation, he definitely couldn't protect Tingting alone, and there was Xigong Chen. As long as Xigong Chen was still there, he was also a threat. Tingting could only deal with the giant beast, but not Xigong Chen. But if he didn't bring Tingting, he was even less confident in dealing with the giant beast. Looking at the current situation, I don't know if Sikong will escape. I think we should hurry over as soon as possible. Dealing with this giant beast is the most important thing, but we can't let Sikong escape. After seeing Wu Qingyue stare at her silently, Lin Xiao knew that he was weighing the consequences of the matter in his heart. She hadn't told him that she still wanted to use that to call out Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness. She didn't know what this man would do if he knew. Wu Qingyue frowned and looked at her deeply, then nodded and turned around. Then let's go. The two of them disappeared from the top of the mountain. At this time, almost everyone in China had retreated to the underground shelter, and there was no one in the base. Only the gunners guarding the 20-plus cannon mounts were still standing in place, waiting for the afterburners to be fired. The tornado in the sky was getting lower and lower. The spinning tip of the tornado pierced through the motionless energy beam, and the huge spinning force began to blow apart the tall buildings on the ground. All the glass windows fell off and flew into the sky along with the trajectory of the wind. The debris, trees, and stones on the ground that were placed outside the building were all lifted into the air. The building began to disintegrate. After the windows fell, the steel and cement on the walls, the platform on the top floor, the edge of the building, etc., were all directly torn off by the wind. Hoo, 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 hoo. The sound of the tornado breaking through the air became softer and softer. The giant beast flying on top of the tornado could no longer be seen, and the ground was in chaos. Sikong stared at the top. He really wanted to go up and shoot the beast down, but he also knew that all weapons were useless against it. The only effective thing was the solar energy attack from the afterburners. However, the afterburner needed too much time to recharge, and the energy core stored before could only be used for 3 attacks at most. After using these 3 attack modes, even the defensive mode could not be used. Moreover, the giant beast on top of the tornado could not be shot down with just 1 shot. So, no matter how he resisted, he could not defeat this rank 9 giant beast. His strength as a level 9 arcanist was like a joke in front of it. Sikong's eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. He stared at the giant tornado that was getting closer and closer, and then his eyes began to move left and right. At this time, Wei Haichao and the others who were standing outside the shelter, and almost all the metahumans below rank 5 had entered. Those who stayed outside were all above rank 6. Han Xiao stood beside Wei Haichao and said to him, "What do you think you will do?" Wei Haichao snorted coldly, his expression slightly cold. He can't beat it anyway. If he doesn't want to die, he can only run away. It's fine if he runs away cleanly, and he can lure the rank 9 monster away. But he still has a glimmer of hope in the afterburner, and it seems that he is just not willing to give up. At this time, a figure appeared beside them and reported to them, "Wu Qingyue is here." Wei Haichao immediately turned his head and looked at Han Xiao, then took out a potion and handed it to him. However, the person did not take it, but looked at him and said, "He said, too." Wei Haichao and Han Xiao were stunned and subconsciously asked, "Who else?" The person replied, "The female leader of Universal Base is also here." "That Lu Tianyu?" Han Xiao said with some surprise. Logically speaking, they only asked Wu Qingyue to help. Why did that woman follow them? To then, ask them to get rid of the one in the sky as soon as possible. Wei Haichao did not hesitate and took out another identical potion and gave it to him. The person took the 2 potions and left in a flash. This Wu Qingyue actually gave up the entire Haiqing base for a woman. Only he would do something like that. Han Xiao sighed speechlessly at the side. In his heart, women were creatures. As long as he was still the leader, he could have as many as he wanted, right? Why give up the power of a leader for a woman? Wei Haichao turned his head and looked at him. That's because you don't have love, you know? You don't have love, so you don't understand other people's love. Han Xiao. Why did this sound a little awkward? Was he laughing at him for being a single dog? You speak as if you know a lot. Can you do what he does? Wei Haichao shrugged. Who knows? Isn't it said that love will make people's brains go bad? Maybe it will get water or a short circuit. Wu Qingyue, who had water in his brain or a short circuit, took the potion that Wei Haichao sent over and suddenly asked that person, "Well, I have a question. Have you tested this on zombies?" The person looked at him with a confused face. "Ah? No." Wu Qingyue smiled at him. "Oh, that's fine. We'll be there right away." As he spoke, he opened the potion and gave it to Lin Xiao, who looked at him. "Drink it." As she spoke, she took the other one and poured it into her mouth. In fact, this potion was useless to her, but she did not intend to say it out loud. Wu Qingyue also poured the potion in his hand into his mouth, and a wave of energy immediately exploded in his body. After this wave of energy exploded in his body, it directly rushed into his head and fiercely crashed into his energy core. Chapter 1442. When Wu Qingyue felt the energy in his body explode, his aura quickly rose. The pressure became stronger and stronger, and his body began to emit crackling purple lightning. Lin Xiao saw that his aura was getting stronger and stronger, and the energy was still within his control. In the end, his entire aura suddenly changed, and he calmed down from his previous explosive state. However, his aura and pressure gave off a suffocating feeling. Rumble dash, there was a faint sound of thunder above his head, as if lightning would fall at any time. Wu Qingyue retracted the energy around him and opened his eyes. A few streaks of purple lightning flashed in his eyes before they returned to black. He raised his hand and clenched his fist. Crackle, a lightning flashed on his fist. He turned to look at Lin Xiao and looked her up and down. After 2 seconds, he asked, "Why didn't you react?" Lin Xiao shrugged. "Maybe this medicine is useless against zombies." Wu Qingyue was silent for a moment, then looked at her deeply. "You and Shouting go into the space first. I will go deal with the giant beast. If I can't do it, you can send Shouting out." Lin Xiao looked at him. "You want to deal with it yourself?" Wu Qingyue looked at her and said, "Put your problem for later. First, get rid of the level 9 beast and Sikong Chen, then you can do whatever you want." He could see that Lin Xiao definitely had a plan, otherwise she wouldn't have followed him here. Lin Xiao thought for a moment, then nodded. "That's fine. If you can't beat it, then don't worry about me." After all, he had just forcibly broken through to the 9th rank. Although he had reached level 9, he was still a bit weak. Wu Qingyue nodded to her, then turned around and disappeared in the direction of China. Lin Xiao followed him and disappeared in a flash. At this time, the ground in China was already raging. The strong wind of the tornado had already shaved off a layer of the buildings in the base. The cement, steel, glass, and other building materials on the walls were all blown away. The 20-plus cannons in the China base were still charging, and it was still a long time before they were fully charged. At this time, Sikong Chen had already retreated to the rooftop of a building in the outer area of the tornado. Meanwhile, Wei Haichao and the others were still guarding the entrance of the fallout shelter. They had to use their energy shields to prevent the door from being blown open by the wind. Wei Haichao, Han Xiao, Lu Jinan, and the others had temporarily upgraded their abilities from rank 7 to rank 8. There was a time limit to the temporary upgrade of their abilities, so they would not easily drink it until the last moment. That was why they had been waiting for external help. Only after Wu Qingyue arrived did they start to improve their abilities. When Wu Qingyue reached level 9, China's Sikong Chen and the giant beast in the sky simultaneously looked in Wu Qingyue's direction. Sikong Chen was a little surprised because he did not know why Wu Qingyue's aura would appear outside the Huaxia base at this time. Furthermore, the other party's aura had suddenly risen to level 9. This was similar to the effect of the medicine that his people had taken to temporarily increase their strength. Could it be? When he suddenly thought of a possibility, the expression on his face changed. His expression immediately became ferocious. Anger, hatred, disbelief, confusion, and other expressions were all mixed together. It caused his facial features to become a little twisted. At this moment, Wei Haichao suddenly appeared beside him. He looked at him and said, "You felt it? We invited him to help. We had to do this for the whole of Huaxia." Sikong Chen glared at him fiercely. "So you betrayed me?" Wei Haichao replied calmly, "I did not betray anyone. Don't forget, I joined the Huaxia base, not your subordinates." Chen stared at him fiercely, but he did not say anything, because he could not refute the other party. Wei Haichao continued to say to him, "If you and Wu Qinghua fight this giant beast together, you might have a chance of winning." Chen gritted his teeth and said, "You want me to join forces with him? Wu Qinghua is willing?" Wei Haichao said, "Anyway, if you don't join forces with him, you won't be able to get rid of this level 9 underground beast. Or, do you want to escape by yourself? Even if you want to escape, you might not be able to. So you have no other choice." This was the result that Wei Haichao had calculated. That was why he could talk to Chen calmly. Because he knew that Chen would be angry, but he would also consider his own situation. Sure enough, Chen just stared at him with his cheeks puffed up. His gaze was like a knife that was going to stab him into a hedgehog. But he did not say anything for a long time. After staring at Wei Haichao for 20 to 30 seconds, he said coldly, "Do you think that by inviting Wu Qinghua over and providing him with the medicine to temporarily raise his level, he can really kill that level 9 subterranean exotic beast? Stop dreaming. What do you think a lightning ability user can do to a monster that can't even be killed by a cannon?" Then he turned his head to look at the inner area of the Huaxia base that had been swallowed by the tornado. He suddenly revealed a strange smile. "Since you want to invite Wu Qinghua to deal with this monster, then let him do it. I want to see how he is going to solve this situation. Do you want to quit? You should know that you can't run. It will chase after you." Wei Haichao frowned and looked at him. Although he had guessed that Chen would have such a reaction, Wei Haichao did not expect Chen to actually do it. "Who said I want to run? I'm watching from the side. You want me to join forces with Wu Qinghua? I don't know why you are so naive. I said, I want to see how Wu Qinghua is going to deal with this level 9 monster alone." Chen looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. Wei Haichao said coldly, "It's fine if you don't want to help. But from now on, you will no longer have anything to do with the Huaxia base. The leader of the Huaxia base will be someone else." Chen revealed a disdainful sneer. "Do you think the current Huaxia is still the Huaxia of the past? This is a disaster area for refugees. Whoever wants to go can go. I don't mind." Wei Haichao nodded and said no more. He turned around and disappeared on the spot. At that moment, a new wave of 9th level energy erupted. Chen's face darkened. This energy seemed to belong to the Blue Land. He had also entered level 9. It seemed that he had also obtained a temporary promotion drug like the one in Huaxia. In this way, excluding himself, there would be 3 level 9 arcanists. Chapter 1443. The combined power of 3 level 9 metahumans was enough to destroy the world. But that level 9 subterranean beast was not to be trifled with. It was immune to abilities. However, it seemed to only be immune to ordinary abilities because it was still afraid of Wu Qinghua's lightning attribute and the poisonous fire attribute of the woman in the universal base. It seemed like it was unable to defend against special attributes. Could it be that the blue continent's spirit element would be able to deal great damage to it? Although it was unlikely, Chen wanted to stay and see what was going on. At this moment, the clouds in the sky began to slowly gather. The dark clouds began to sink, and the clouds became darker. The light in the surroundings, which had already been dimmed by the tornado, became even dimmer. Boom, boom. Faint muffled sounds of thunder could be heard from within the dark clouds, and bolts of purple lightning began to flash out gradually. Whoosh! The giant beast that was circling suddenly stopped. It raised its head and looked at the dark clouds that were getting closer and closer. However, it did not show any signs of retreating. It only stared at the sky in confusion and hesitation. At this moment, a bolt of lightning suddenly exploded. Boom! A bolt of lightning crackled from above and struck down at the giant beast. The explosive energy contained in the lightning made the giant beast want to dodge subconsciously, but its reaction was not as fast as the lightning. Hence, it took a very solid hit. Boom! Roar. The giant beast roared angrily. This was 10 times more painful than being hit by the cannons. Rumble. The clouds in the sky were getting shorter and shorter, and a formless and violent pressure was also gradually descending. At this moment, the giant beast's eyes revealed a look of fear. It bared its fangs, and its eyes turned vertical. The beast's face turned sinister, and it glared fiercely at the sky. It was as if there was an enemy in the sky, but it could not see this enemy. However, this enemy was hiding in the dark and striking it with lightning. Just as it began to raise its guard, another purple lightning bolt as thick as an adult's thigh struck down with a crackling sound. This time, because the gigantic beast had been staring up, it quickly dodged. But just as it dodged to the side, the root of its tail exploded with a bang. Just as it dodged the first bolt of lightning, the second bolt of lightning struck down without it knowing. A piece of flesh at the base of its tail was blown off, and the giant beast let out a blood-curdling screech. Crackle. However, the lightning wasn't over yet. Just as it was screaming, more bolts of lightning descended from the sky. Moreover, the color of the lightning was a little strange. It was no longer purple, but purple-black. Its speed was extremely fast. It took less than 0.01 seconds for it to descend from the clouds and descend with a swoosh. Moreover, it was a group of black thunderbolts. Roar! The giant beast's body flashed, and in an instant, it was 1,000 meters away. However, there were still a few wounds on its body. Although there were a few wounds on its body, they were not fatal to its huge body that was almost 1,000 meters long. However, it was so painful that it wanted to go crazy. That's great. Wu Qingyue's attack was very effective. It seems that we made the right bet. Seeing the giant beast's reaction, Wei Haichao and the others showed an excited expression. Roar! After the giant beast flashed 1,000 meters away, it immediately turned its head and roared at the dark clouds in the sky. It sent out its sound wave attack. Puff! Wu Qingyue, who was controlling the lightning on the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood. The lightning array in the sky was summoned by his ability, and it used a lot of energy to summon these thunderbolts. But in addition to the thunderbolts he summoned, the thunderbolts themselves began to gather more and more energy, and then began to condense into black thunderbolts. Wu Qingyue originally wanted to control these overloaded thunderbolts, but he was unable to do so. After all, he was not a true rank 9 ability user. He did not have enough energy to begin with, and he could only forcibly stimulate it. So after the giant beast roared at the thunderclouds in the sky, it directly shook Wu Qingyue's body. He caused external injuries to the giant beast, and the giant beast caused internal injuries to him. The situation between the two sides could be considered to be somewhat of a tie. Lin Xiao sat in the living room of the small building in the space, closed her eyes, and looked at the situation outside the space. Tung Tung sat next to her. This time, they did not bring Wu Yueling along, but let her accompany Xiao Lu in Lin Feng's place. Feeling the pressure of the giant beast at such a close distance, Lin Xiao felt something in her body become restless. Especially when the giant beast roared at the sky just now, it made her heart palpitate. Tung Tung sat next to her, quietly showing an expression of thinking. After Lin Xiao opened her eyes, she saw his appearance. She could not help but ask, "What's wrong? Did you find a way to deal with that monster?" Tung Tung could also sense some of the energy fluctuations and some of the general situation outside, but he could not see the scene outside, so he could not see some of the details. He did not expect his father to be so powerful after advancing to rank 9. He could feel the energy contained in the thunderbolts that Wu Qingyue was now controlling. It was a huge explosive energy that was dozens of times stronger than ordinary thunderbolts. Moreover, there was a strange magnetic field within it. Moreover, the giant beast's aura was indeed very dangerous, but compared to the faint sense of crisis that came from the dark clouds in the sky, it was a bit lacking. If Wu Qingyue was a real rank 9 ability user, perhaps he could have the ability to defeat this giant beast. Even if he could not defeat it, he could at least drive it away. However, he was not the real one, he was just a fake rank 9 ability user. His energy was stimulated to rank 9, but it was still a bit weaker than a normal rank 9 ability user. Moreover, this state of his had a limited time. it would not take long for him to return to his rank 8 state. Hearing Lin Xiao ask him, Tung Tung looked up at her. I can't feel its weakness in here. I have to go out. After all, this space was like a barrier, isolating him from his senses. Lin Xiao weighed the current situation outside. The giant beast was now being restrained by Wu Qingyue, while Xigong Chen, Lan Lu, and his leader were watching. There should not be any accidents. Thinking of this, she decided to send Tung Ting out. He had to find the giant beast's weakness because he was the only one who could do that. Then I'll take you out to have a look, but you have to hurry, she said to Tung Tung. Tung Ting said to her, Don't worry, I'm here. Even if the other consciousness of your body wakes up, I can suppress it. Chapter 1444. Lin Xiao looked at her son's confident expression and took a deep breath. Then, she carried him out of the space. As soon as she came out, several suppressive forces pressed down on her from head to toe. The suppressive force from Wu Qingyue's lightning, the giant beast's frenzied suppressive force, and the pressure from Xigong Chen, Lan Lu, and Dong Xiaowei outside the base made Lin Xiao's heart feel stifled. The restless thing from before immediately appeared in her mind even more intensely, as if it wanted to take control of her body. She tried her best to suppress her emotions and calm her mind. Tung Tung hugged her neck. As soon as he came out, he turned to look at the giant beast. When Tung Tung came out, the giant beast suddenly froze for a moment. Then, it shook off Wu Qingyue's attack and looked in Tung Ting's direction. In an instant, Tung Tung's attention connected with the giant beast's, as if two minds were connected. After Tung Tung's consciousness connected with the giant beast's, he suddenly instinctively looked in the giant beast's direction and roared in a childish voice, Wu, Lin Xiao. Although his expression seemed to be very imposing, it couldn't hide his childish voice. As soon as he roared, his entire aura collapsed. However, after the giant beast heard his roar, Tung Tung, who did not have any aura at all, suddenly let out a deep roar. Wu, seeing that the giant beast's attention was attracted by Tung Tung, Wu Qingyue waved his hand again and summoned a few black lightning bolts from the sky to attack it. He was shocked and injured just now, so the energy in his body was somewhat chaotic. Therefore, he could only summon a few black lightning bolts and could not summon any more. However, after the giant beast suffered a huge loss just now, it was already paying attention to the abnormal movements above its head. As long as there were any changes above, it would immediately dodge. Therefore, this time, the lightning that Wu Qingyue summoned did not hit it. Instead, it made a turn and suddenly flashed towards Tung Tung and Lin Xiao's location. The giant beast's speed was already very fast, so in the blink of an eye, it was behind Lin Xiao. It wasn't that Lin Xiao didn't react in time. She did, but it was too late for her to dodge. When the giant beast appeared behind her, her whole body stiffened. His aura seemed to have been locked, and he was unable to move. Wu Qingyue almost exploded when he saw the gigantic beast suddenly appear behind his wife and son. His eyes widened, and he immediately rushed over in a flash. In the end, when he was only a few hundred meters away from Lin Xiao and his companion, he was suddenly slapped away by a giant tail that swept out from the side. Pa! Lin Xiao could only watch helplessly as Wu Qingyue was sent flying by the giant beast's tail, unable to move. However, she didn't have time to worry about Wu Qingyue because he wouldn't die from this slap. She had to deal with the current situation. Lin Xiao couldn't move, but little Tung Tung didn't feel this way at all. Instead, he held onto Lin Xiao's neck and climbed up, looking at the giant beast from the back of her neck. The giant beast was less than 100 meters away from him, but its giant head was clearly in front of little Tung Tung. Roar, roar. Little Tung Tung used a zombie's tone and began to roar at it. The giant beast only snorted at him, but didn't make any sound, and didn't have any other reaction. The only thing was that the tail behind him began to sway left and right rhythmically. What's going on? Why can't I understand? Wei Haichao and Han Xiao stood not far from the blue continent. The two of them raised their chins and looked in the direction of the giant beast with big question marks on their faces. To be precise, They were looking at the giant beast's head and where Lin Xiao was. Although Wu Qingyue was swept away, he only flew a few hundred meters before he turned around and stabilized his body. When he saw that the giant beast hadn't attacked little Tingtung and Lin Xiao, he forced himself to calm down. He didn't know what kind of state Tingtung and the giant beast were in, but at least he was more confident than the others. This was because Lin Wenwen said that he saw little Tung Tung taming the giant beast, so he let little Tung Tung deal with it himself. Perhaps this was the time when his talent was truly displayed. But other than him and Lin Xiao, everyone else was dumbfounded. Originally, when he saw the giant beast rushing towards Lin Xiao and the child, he thought that it would swallow the two of them. But now, they were all standing in midair. What was going on? Lin Xiao was holding little Tung Tung stiffly. Being locked on by a level 9 giant beast from behind was really frightening. This was also the most dangerous moment she had encountered since her rebirth. Because if little Tung Tung couldn't deal with this giant beast, she might not even be able to flash into the space with little Tung Tung. Because she couldn't move. Even if she could freely control her consciousness, her body was no longer under her control. She asked little Tung Tung, "Don't tell me you're communicating with it?" This was because she could understand little Tung Tung's roar, but she couldn't understand the giant beast's voice. But looking at the situation, the two of them, one big and one small, seemed to be communicating with each other. Ayo, ayo, ayo. Little Tung Tung suddenly roared at the giant beast. Roar dash, the giant beast roared at it, then quietly looked at little Tung Tung's direction and floated in midair. Tung Tung turned to Lin Xiao excitedly and said, "Yes, yes, I can talk to it. Actually, if you use a zombie voice to shout at it, it can also understand you." At the same time, Lin Xiao felt the pressure on her body loosen, and the state of being locked on by a strong being was immediately lifted. Hearing little Tung Tung's words, she suddenly remembered that De Zhuang and De Hong seemed to be able to understand her zombie voice. And after seeing that she couldn't understand their voice, they would be smart enough to respond to her with actions. "Then what did you say to it?" Lin Xiao couldn't help but ask. She turned around and faced the giant beast. Looking at its head from a close distance, she realized that this guy looked very strange. There were 2 horns on its head and 2 thorns at the corner of its eyes. Especially the 2 thorns at the corner of its eyes. They were very long and very thin. It looked like its eyelashes were flying up. Its eyes were very big, and on its entire face, it looked like 2 huge light bulbs. Its face was long, and its nose was a bit long and pointed, a bit like a dog's mouth. When it bared its teeth or opened its mouth, the 2 sides of its mouth would be very wide. Chapter 1445. When Lin Xiao asked little Ting Tung what he said to the beast, little Ting Tung replied, "Hee, I asked it what it was, and it said it didn't know what it was either. Then I asked it why it came here, and it said that its house was broken, so it came out." "It's broken?" Lin Xiao looked at him blankly. What the hell was broken? Tung Ting turned his head to look at the big monster and said, "It seems to like me a lot. It gave me a very joyful feeling." Lin Xiao looked at him curiously. "It's amazing that you can still talk to it. Can you ask it if its underground space can still go back?" Little Tung Ting shook its head at her before asking, "No, it said it was broken just now. It means that the underground space is no longer suitable for it to live in, so it will come out." Lin Xiao used his arm to support his little butt, turned his head to look at the giant beast and asked, "What do we do now? Can it get out of here? If you don't want to return to the underground space, you can go somewhere else." Little Tung Tung's little face revealed a pondering expression and said, "Why did you let it go? I think it's fine to leave it here. As long as we don't provoke it first, it shouldn't do anything to the human base. I don't think it's interested in humans." After all, this giant beast had already regarded this place as its territory, so it would definitely not be willing to let it go. But if it doesn't harm the human base, it's fine to keep it here. After all, this giant beast did not seem to like eating human flesh. From the moment it appeared on the Chinese base, it only attacked Xikong Chen, and its attacks were not directed at humans, nor did it catch anyone to eat. At least Xiaotingting and Lin Xiao didn't smell any human blood from its mouth. Instead, there was the scent of blood from many other creatures. Lin Xiao looked at him and asked, "You said that it has no interest in humans, but it is now attacking the Huaxia base." Tung Ting shook his head. "No, it doesn't care about these people. It only wants to deal with that level 9 guy. That's because it's very interested in his energy core. After all, it's a level 9 energy core." As he spoke, he turned his head and looked in the direction of Sikong Chun and the others. Then he turned around and continued, "And I'm still here. I think if I discuss it with it, it will probably agree." Lin Xiao couldn't help but look at the motionless giant beast and asked Ting Tung, "What do you want to discuss with it?" "Of course we're going to discuss it, so that it won't cause trouble in the human base in the future. Besides, apart from the human base, it can go wherever it wants in the outside world." Little Tung Ting said confidently. "Will it listen to you? Do you think it will leave just because you say so?" Lin Xiao looked at Little Tung Tung suspiciously. He really didn't know where he got his confidence from. Did he think that he could just talk the beast away? Tung Tung smiled at her mysteriously. His two bright eyes revealed a little complacency. He said to her with a smile, "Mama, don't you know that there is a word called deception? To put it nicely, it should be called persuasion, right?" Lin Xiao was stunned, then looked at him in disbelief. "So, are you trying to trick it out of me? How can a child lie? But if he can persuade this giant beast to leave, then so be it." After all, he knew the severity of the situation. Just when little Ting Tung was about to say a few words to lure the giant beast out of the human base, a huge light beam suddenly fell from the sky. The light beam contained the high-temperature energy of the solar energy, and it directly rumbled towards the giant beast. "Be careful." Wu Qingyue, who had been standing on the side and staring at the giant beast, Lin Xiao and Ting Tung, suddenly shouted and rushed over in a flash. But no one noticed the sudden descent of the light beam. The giant beast was the first to react. But it didn't directly avoid it. Instead, it instantly swung its tail and swept it towards Lin Xiao and Ting Tung. Boom! A thick solar beam with a diameter of about 10 meters directly blasted the giant beast's body. Roar! The giant beast's body tumbled down from the impact, and it subconsciously roared angrily. Pft! 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 Wu Qingyue, who rushed over, and Ting Tung, who was about to return to the space after being swept away by the giant beast, all three of them spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. "Who fired the cannon?" Wei Haichao saw this and was stunned for a moment, then suddenly asked angrily. "He's the one who commanded and operated the cannon. Without his special token, we can't control the cannon." Han Xiao said calmly. He was referring to Sikong Chun. Moreover, the cannon had been continuously adding energy, and it didn't stop even after Wu Qingyue and the others appeared. So it was normal for it to be shot down now. And obviously, Sikong Chun was very willing to see this situation. After all, he would be very happy if either Wu Qingyue or the giant beast was injured. Wei Haichao's expression darkened when he heard this. The giant beast had just calmed down, but now it was angered again. It would definitely retaliate crazily next. Roar! The giant beast rolled in midair for a few hundred meters, then flipped over and flew up again. It roared angrily at its surroundings, and the shockwaves from its voice swept out like waves. Soon, Wei Haichao and a large group of people who were still on the ground all spat out blood. This was not the first time they were spat out blood because of the giant beast's roar. "Don't run. Sikong Chun, where do you think you're going?" At this time, a voice suddenly shouted. Only then did everyone realize that Sikong Chen's figure was no longer in the same place, but had suddenly rushed out of the base. The one who shouted was Lan Lu. He was the least affected by the giant beast's shockwave. Obviously, it was because his spiritual ability had reached the 9th rank, and his consciousness had become a level higher. As he shouted, he also rushed out in time. Another level 9 arcanist rushed out with him. "Xiaowei, follow me. Kill that bastard. Don't let him escape." Lan Lu shouted to Dong Xiaowei, who was next to him as he chased. Dong Xiaowei's figure flashed again, and his speed immediately doubled as he rushed to the front. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Lan Lu's sight, although his level had indeed increased, and his spiritual consciousness had become very strong. However, his body was still weak. So now he could only watch others chase after Sikong Chun while he anxiously stood behind. But he was not really anxious, because his spiritual consciousness had already caught up to Sikong Chun one step ahead of him. As long as they were within 1,000 miles, he could use his spiritual consciousness to affect the other's spiritual consciousness. Sure enough, Sikong Chun did not run for long before his whole body suddenly trembled and fell from the sky. He had already spat out blood several times because of the giant beast's shockwave. His body and spiritual consciousness had already become a lot weaker. Now that he was attacked by Lan Lu's spiritual consciousness, his whole body suddenly collapsed. Chapter 1446. Seeing Sikong Chun being attacked by Lan Lu, Dong Xiaowei immediately rushed over. He jumped into the air, clenched his fist, and smashed it down on Sikong Chun, who had fallen to the ground. Although Sikong Chun was hit by Lan Lu's mental attack, he wasn't weak. After all, he was a real level 9, and when he fell, he had already recovered half of his strength. After falling to the ground, he saw Dong Xiaowei's attack, so he raised a flame barrier. Boom! Dong Xiaowei's fist, which carried a force of 1,000 catties, smashed onto the surface of his emergency barrier, forcefully causing it to cave in. But unfortunately, he didn't break the flame barrier and was bounced back by the flame barrier. While Lan Lu and Dong Xiaowei were chasing Sikong Chun, Wu Qingyue rushed to the side of the giant beast and looked around for Lin Xiao and Tingting. He saw Lin Xiao and Tingting being swept away, but he couldn't feel their presence at all. Wu Qingyue was relieved. At least this meant that Lin Xiao had taken Tingting to hide in the space. However, he didn't know that Lin Xiao in the space was completely different. Roar dash! Her messy hair was scattered on her face, and her head was bowed. Her legs were spread apart and slightly bent down. Her whole body emitted a kind of manic aura, and her presence had also changed. It was completely different from the original one. Tingting was no longer on her body, but in the arms of Lu Tianyi on the other side. She became like this again. Lu Tianyi held Tingting and pulled a safe distance from Lin Xiao. The current Lin Xiao seemed to have become a completely different person. Her presence became very strange, and it also had a very oppressive feeling. She is your sister, but now she has become a zombie,
Tingting said to him at this time.
Lu Tianyi looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Tingting said, "She is no longer my mama." The zombie consciousness in her body was originally awake, that is, it originally belonged to your sister Lu Tianyi transformed into a zombie consciousness. But now she is an ordinary zombie, and she has no memory. And it will attack you. It's coming. Roar. Before Little Tung could finish speaking, Lu Tianyi suddenly raised his head and roared ferociously. In the next second, he leaped toward Lu Tianyi and Little Tung and pounced down. Lu Tianyi was completely unable to move because the aura of his entire body had been locked down and suppressed by Lu Tianyi. He was only a level 5 zombie chief, so he had no way of resisting the zombie emperor. Seeing Lu Tianyi about to rush over, Lu Tianyi was also anxious. Obviously, this female zombie wasn't here to catch up with her. At this moment, Little Tingtung in his arms suddenly shouted at Lu Tianyi, who had already run into the sky and was about to land on them. As a result, a confused expression suddenly appeared on Lu Tianyi's face. Her eyes, which had turned as black as ink, were covered with a layer of mist. Her movements also lost their aggressiveness, and the aura that had locked onto Lu Tianyi also dissipated. After Lu Tianyi felt that he was no longer being locked on, he immediately turned around and dodged while hugging Little Tingtung. "Quick, let's go into the lake." Little Tingtung hugged his neck and said. Lu Tianyi subconsciously ran towards the lake, but stopped halfway. "But I can't get close to this lake." Little Tingting said, "Then just throw me down." Lu Tianyi. "Are you sure? Hurry up, hurry up. She's coming over." Little Tung Ting didn't care about his doubts and patted him on the shoulder with his little hand. At this moment, Lu Tianyu's eyes flashed, and the confused expression just now disappeared. Her eyes turned cold, and she immediately turned her head to stare at Lu Tiany. Lu Tiany could only barely raise his hand to lift little Ting Ting up and then threw him into the lake more than 10 meters away like a basketball.
Plop.
Little Ting Ting fell into the water with a thud. Just after he fell into the water, the energy in the lake immediately gathered on him. Lu Tianyu's body moved at this time, and she stretched out her 2 claws and pounced towards Lu Tiany, who was closest to her. Lu Tiany once again watched her pounce towards him with her fangs and claws, and he couldn't help but close his eyes and prepare to bear the next devastation. However, just as he closed his eyes, Lu Tianyu's figure suddenly flashed and disappeared. Huh! Lu Tiany felt his whole body relax, and when he looked up, he found that Lu Tianyu was no longer around. Looking at Lu Tianyu's face with blue veins, disheveled hair, and dark, cold and fierce eyes, she bared her teeth, and her limbs were bent unnaturally. This was the true appearance of his sister after turning into a zombie, looking terrifying and ferocious. Although even if she became like this, he wouldn't mind her sister. But he couldn't accept the situation where she wanted to bite him. Little Tung Tung poked his head out of the water, then used his short hands and legs to swim to the lake, and climbed up the shore dripping wet. He was no longer in the lake, and the energy pressure in the lake spread out again. Lu Tiany could not get within 5 meters of the lake. He could only stand 5 meters away and watch Tung Tung crawl over. You got her out? Lu Tiany stared at little Ting Tung as he crawled closer and closer to him. He did feel the energy in the lake gather together after the little Tung fell into the water. Then the entire space seemed to tremble with energy, and Lu Tianyu disappeared. However, wasn't this space the special ability of Lu Tianyu's body? Why could little Tung Tung control this space? Shout Ting Ting climbed to his side and stretched out his arms to hug him. After being hugged by him, he replied, "Yes, I was the one who got her out. Because she no longer has any connection with this space, the control has returned to my hands." Lu Tiany carried him to the small building and took off his wet clothes. Puzzled, he asked, "Back in your hands again?" Why didn't he seem to understand? Why did it return to this child's hands? Shout Ting Ting said, "Do you think this is my mama's superpower? In fact, it's not. This space is not of my superpower. And this space was originally mine, but it was later given to Mama. Now that Mama is gone, your sister's body has just become an ordinary zombie, so she has nothing to do with this space. I can send her out." Lu Tiany looked at him with a dumbfounded face. Is there such a thing? After all this time, it turned out that this space was not of her superpower? Then how did it come about? Chapter 1447. Little Tung Tung lowered his head again and said, "But this space is also very important to Mama. Help me change my clothes. We have to go out and find Mama quickly." Lu Tiany asked in confusion, "How?" Now that Lin Xiao had become zombie Lu Tianyu, where did Lin Xiao go? Was he still in her body? But wasn't this space already separated from her body? What was the use of finding him? Little Tung Ting seemed to have guessed his thoughts and said, "I have to find the 2 of them so I can help Mama." Lu Tiany found dry clothes for him and helped him change. He still didn't understand. What? Can you still help her? Yes. Or, do you not want to help us? Little Tung Ting nodded, but suddenly turned his head to look at him. Even if this zombie Lu Tianyu had become an ordinary zombie, it was still Lu Tianyu's instinctive consciousness. In other words, even if she lost her memory and became a zombie, this was still his sister. Lu Tiany looked at him, silently. On one side was his sister's instinctive zombie consciousness, and on the other side was Lin Xiao's consciousness. He didn't deny that he only loved his sister Lu Tianyu. If Lin Xiao hadn't taken over this body and could continue to keep this body intact for Lu Tianyu, he wouldn't have been willing to follow her. And this Lin Xiao had been hiding it from him at that time. But thinking about it, since Lin Xiao entered his zombie sister's body, she had helped him many times. He wasn't that kind of scum, so he wouldn't be ungrateful. Why wouldn't I help you? At least you called me uncle, didn't you? After a few seconds of silence, Lu Tianyi looked at little Ting Tung and said with a sigh, "Okay, then we're going out." Little Ting Ting saw that his attitude was clear, and his little face immediately showed a happy expression. Then he grabbed Lu Tianyi's clothes with his little hand, and the two disappeared from the small building in the space. The giant beast outside was violently tossing and turning, and its mouth let out a series of vibrating roars. Whether it was Wei Haichao and the others on the ground, or even the survivors who had fallen into the underground shelter, they all vomited blood and fainted one by one. Roar, roar. But after roaring for a while, it suddenly began to jump around the base, looking for something. Wu Qingyue stayed far away from its range. Wei Haichao, Han Xiao, and the others quickly went to take control of the booster turrets. In the distance, Lan Lu finally caught up to Xigong Chen, who was fighting with Dong Xiaowei. In the remaining time, the two of them began to attack Xigong Chen together. The stabbing pain in his head made him grimace in pain, but his eyes were wide open. His eyes were bloodshot, and the veins on his forehead were bulging. But in less than 2 seconds, he gave up and turned around to escape. Lan Lu and Dong Xiaowei immediately gave chase. At this time, the giant beast in the sky above China did not find what it was looking for after circling around a few times. Suddenly, he turned his head and chased after Xigong Chen. The tornado that swept over the center of Huaxia also slowly calmed down at this time. Wu Qingyue appeared beside Wei Haichao and the others. He raised his head and looked at the 20-odd beams of light that shot into the sky. "You guys can't restrict its freedom, but you can still attack it." "How strange," he said to Wei Haichao. Wei Haichao replied, "The energy expended for one attack is equivalent to the energy expended for 50 defenses. So the little bit of defense you have can only defend against some external attacks, but it can't defend against its unique physique. It's a level 9 exotic beast, after all. Almost nothing can stop it." Wu Qingyue nodded. "That's true." At this moment, Wei Haichao turned to look outside the base and asked, "Aren't you going to chase after Xigong Chen?" Wu Qingyue turned to look as well and suddenly said, "Don't worry, he won't be able to escape." Wei Haichao roughly understood what he meant, because he could also sense Lan Lu and Dong Xiaowei's auras following him. At this moment, a sharp roar suddenly rang out. Roar! An unfamiliar and ruthless zombie aura suddenly appeared in the sky above the base. Wu Qingyue and the others immediately turned to look and saw a figure appearing in the sky. Her overly long hair was fluttering in the wind, and her head was lowered and her back was arched. Her hair was fluttering behind her like the tentacles of a devil, and the aura of a level 8 zombie emperor spread out in all directions. Roar, roar, roar. Her roar immediately caused all the zombies within 100 to 300 kilometers to turn around and charge in this direction. Where did this zombie emperor come from? Wei Haichao looked at the zombie emperor that suddenly appeared, and all he could see was black hair fluttering in the wind. She was like a witch, and her aura was that of a dark zombie emperor. As if to answer his question, the new zombie emperor raised her head and roared again. Roar. This time, she slightly revealed her face under her long hair, allowing Wei Haichao and the others to see. Wei Haichao and the others were all psychics above level 7 or 8. As long as they gathered a little energy in their eyes, they could see things 2 or 3 kilometers away. Although they only saw the side of the face this time, they still saw who it was. When they saw it clearly, they immediately revealed astonished expressions. Isn't this the female leader of the base?" Han Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue next to him. Wu Qingyue just stared at Lu Tianyu in the sky with a sullen face. He knew that she was no longer Lin Xiao in this state. After Wei Haichao stared at Lu Tianyu a few times, he suddenly showed an expression of understanding. "I knew it. I heard that this woman was killed by you once before, but then she appeared again for some reason." As he spoke, he looked at Wu Qingyue meaningfully. Wu Qingyue glanced at him faintly and then admitted very straightforwardly, "Yes, she is a zombie. And from the time you said, She had already become a zombie. Anyway, Lin Xiao's zombie identity would be revealed sooner or later, and now the base had already made this secret public. So there was no need to hide Lin Xiao's zombie identity anymore. It's just that these people definitely wouldn't have thought that the zombie's core had already been changed. It was no longer the original Lu Tianyu, but this kind of soul rebirth. She couldn't say it out loud. This was much more incredible than her identity as a zombie. If people knew about her situation, maybe those who were not interested in her body would continue to be interested in her. Chapter 1448. So she's really a zombie. Han Xiao, who was next to him, also showed a look of novelty. They had only suspected it before, but they didn't expect Wu Qingyue to say it so directly now. Didn't he have any concerns? Wu Qingyue looked at the two of them and smiled. Whether she's a zombie or a human, she's mine now. Don't be too interested in her. Wei Haichao and Han Xiao shook their heads at the same time. Sorry, our taste isn't as strong as yours. But what's going on with her now? Something doesn't seem right? Wu Qingyue said calmly. It's okay, just don't get close. Strengthen the defense of your weapon. The zombie tide is coming. After saying that, he flashed and rushed toward the zombie queen in the air. Wei Haichao and Han Xiao looked at each other and said in confusion, What the hell is this? What's the situation now? Han Xiao shrugged. It doesn't look like a good situation. And the zombie tide is really coming. Saying that, he turned his head and looked at the periphery of the base. As soon as the two saw Wu Qingyue's expression, they knew that something had happened to the woman. Although he looked calm and collected, looking at the crazy female zombie, he felt that things were not going to be easy to deal with. After all, that was the zombie emperor, a level 8 zombie. It wasn't something that a level 8 psychic could defeat, although Wu Qingyue was now level 9. But he was a fake level 9 psychic, not real. And their time was almost up. Roar dash, seeing Wu Qingyue rushing toward her, Lu Tianyu suddenly turned her head and roared at him, then her figure flashed and rushed toward him. At the same time, she waved a lot of black flames with both hands, and the flames spread behind her. Wu Qingyue rushed over because he knew that Lu Tianyu's identity was currently controlled by Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness. Although he didn't know how to help Lin Xiao deal with Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness, it was right to at least control her body first. At this time, Lu Tianyu's eyes were as dark as ink, and a strange black color filled both of her eye sockets. Her mouth was also very wide, and there were traces of cracks on both sides of her mouth. She opened her mouth wide, showing 2 rows of sharp teeth. His long hair fluttered behind him, making him look as ferocious and terrifying as a monster. Boom! Seeing that she was coming towards him, Wu Qingyue immediately summoned a purple thunderbolt. The lightning struck Lu Tianyu's body accurately. A whoa! Lu Tianyu screamed, but she was not struck down by the lightning. Instead, he continued to charge at Wu Qingyue. After being struck by the lightning, her originally elegant long hair was blown into a mess. Her face was also blasted black, and her clothes were torn in many places. Fortunately, the important parts were not broken. Roar. After being blown up, Lu Tianyu seemed to be angry. After roaring, his figure suddenly disappeared in a flash. However, Wu Qingyue instantly raised his head because Lu Tianyu had instantly moved above his head and then rushed down from above. Its speed was as fast as the speed of light. Just as he raised his head, this ferocious-looking female zombie had already rushed down from above and was less than 2 meters away from his head. A sharp claw flashing with black light fiercely clawed down at him. Wu Qingyue immediately leaned to the side and narrowly avoided her claws, but he was unable to avoid the air claws formed by her claws. Puff! A few claws slashed down from his chest. Blood splattered. And Wu Qingyue snorted, thinking that he really shouldn't have shown mercy just now and only used purple lightning to strike her. He should have used black lightning to strike her. He covered his chest and retreated to the side. His chest was already stained with blood. But before he could stand still, he immediately raised his hand and quickly waved at Lu Tianyu. Crack dash, a black lightning bolt descended from the sky. Although he summoned a black lightning bolt in time, Lu Tianyu had already expected it and suddenly dodged to the side, avoiding his black lightning bolt. Bang dash, the black lightning bolt hit the top of a 10-story building on the ground. In an instant, a large amount of flames and smoke exploded. Then, after the flames and smoke disappeared, the building was also blown up. Only 2 floors of wreckage were left on the ground.
Wow.
I just got rid of a level 9 monster, and now there's a level 8 zombie emperor. What's going on? Wei Haichao was speechless for a moment when he saw Wu Qingyue fighting fiercely with a female zombie. Didn't he invite them over to help? Why were they fighting on his turf now? What the hell is going on? And the damage caused by this destruction is not small. After Lu Tianyu dodged the black lightning bolt, she immediately waved her hand, and the black flames burning in the air behind her suddenly rushed towards Wu Qingyue like a tide. Wu Qingyue was also very afraid of the violent devouring energy in the flames, and he also couldn't let these flames touch any part of his body. Otherwise, his energy would be devoured, and then his body would be devoured. He understood the role of Lin Xiao's black fire ability, even if he had temporarily advanced to level 9. But he also can't underestimate Lu Tianyu's ability as a level 8 zombie emperor. Boom 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 dash. Seeing the black flames in the sky quickly surging towards him, Wu Qingyue immediately raised his hand and summoned a group of lightning bolts. The lightning bolts all penetrated the black flames in the sky, but were unable to blast them apart. Looking at the miserable craters on the ground that were blasted by the lightning bolts, Wei Haichao and Han Xiao were also speechless. On the other side, Lu Jinan stared closely at Lu Tianyu, who was fighting with Wu Qingyue in the sky, with a strange smile on the corner of his mouth, and his eyes revealed a hungry look. Inside the base, everyone was watching the battle. Outside, Xigong Chen didn't run far before he was suddenly blocked by a giant beast that was dozens of times faster than him. Roar dash! The giant beast teleported to block Xigong Chen's path, turned its head and roared in Xigong Chen's direction. Not good. Whether it was Xigong Chen or Lan Lu and Dong Xiaowei who were chasing behind him, all 3 of them had a bad feeling at the same time. Then, after the giant beast roared, all 3 of them were shocked as expected. Their minds went blank. Then, after a pain in their chest, a stream of blood immediately gushed out. PFT-, the 3 of them exhaled at the same time. Xigong Chen was the most serious. This time he was too close to the giant beast, so he was the most shocked. He was already seriously injured, and now he was even more stunned. Even a level 9 ability user couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't take it anymore. His vision went black, and the world disappeared from his consciousness. When his eyes rolled back, the giant beast flashed past with its mouth open. Xigong Chen's figure disappeared in its mouth. Chapter 1449. Little Wei, come here. Sensing that Xigong Chen's aura had disappeared into the gigantic beast's mouth, Lan Luli immediately transmitted a thought to Dong Xiaowei. Dong Xiaowei's figure flashed and appeared next to him. After the beast swallowed Xigong Chen, it immediately turned its head and stared at Dong Xiaowei's direction. Lan Lu and Dong Xiaowei immediately became alert, ready to deal with it at any time. But at this time, the 2 huge eyes of the giant beast suddenly turned around and looked at the direction of Huaxia City. Then it directly turned its head and disappeared in front of them. On the other side of Huaxia City, Wei Haichao and others were watching the fight between Wu Qingyue and the zombie Lu Tianyu. Suddenly, Lu Tianyu carried little Ting Tung and appeared on the roof of a building on the other side. Ah! As soon as little Ting Tung came out, he screamed in Lu Tianyu's direction. His voice was especially sharp and high-pitched, and it was a very long scream. Lu Tianyu, who was about to attack Wu Qingyue with her claws, suddenly froze when she heard Ting Ting's cry. He turned his head to look in the direction of Xiao Ting Tung, and his black and violent eyes were filled with confusion. At this time, Wu Qingyue flashed to the side of little Ting Tung and Lu Tianyu. His chest was dripping with blood, soaking his clothes. Tung Tung sniffed at him. What should we do? Now that there's no way to control this guy, can your mom really do it? Wu Qingyue stood beside them and asked aloud. Although he found that Ting Ting's cry seemed to have some effect on the female zombie, it didn't seem to have much effect. Because in just 2 seconds, the female zombie had recovered. Roar dash! The recovered female zombie Lu Tianyu roared angrily at the three of them, and then her figure flashed and disappeared. The moment she disappeared, Wu Qingyue immediately raised his hand and created a light barrier that covered the three of them. Purple lightning crackled and flashed on his light shield. Countless purple lightning bolts intertwined with each other on the light shield, as if they were weaving an electric net on the light shield. Bang! Just as he propped up the lightning barrier, Lu Tianyu's figure flashed behind them. It swung its claws at them, but it was blocked by the electric barrier. Lu Tianyu turned around and saw her baring her fangs and brandishing her claws, and then she suddenly appeared behind him. He was startled.
Wow.
What's with her face? Wu Qingyue and little Tung Ting turned around and saw that there were strange black lines spreading around her eyes. It covered her forehead and upper half of her face, and it was also hidden under her messy hair. It looked very scary. Hiss! Roar! She bared her teeth at little Ting Tung and roared at him with a fierce expression. She looked like she wanted to rush over and tear them apart, but as soon as she touched Wu Qingyue's electric barrier, she would be blown up. Little Tung Ting narrowed its eyes and sniffed at her. Suddenly, he turned his head to Wu Qingyue and said, "Dad, her mental strength is increasing. The stronger her mental power is, the more disadvantageous it is for Mama." Wu Qingyue looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Little Tung Ting looked at Lu Tianyu, then turned to Wu Qingyue and said, "Attack her. Use your lightning energy to attack her." Wu Qingyue sighed and said, "Do you think I don't want to? I've been attacking her seriously since just now, but she's moving too fast now, so I can't lock onto her." Little Tung Tung fell silent, and its two bright eyes were a little gloomy as it pondered. At this moment, a strange roar suddenly came from a distance. Roar! They were all familiar with this roar. It was that level 9 giant beast. As soon as little Tung Tung heard its voice, its dark eyes suddenly lit up. Got it. That's it. Lu Tianyu was originally floating outside Wu Qingyue's electric barrier, trying to continue to break it, but after hearing this roar, she suddenly raised her head and looked over there vigilantly. Then she turned around and disappeared in a flash. Not good. We can't let her get away. Little Ting Ting immediately called out to Wu Qingyue nervously when he saw her disappear. Then he turned his head towards the direction of the giant beast and let out a miraculously sharp zombie roar. Although it was still a childish sound, it was miraculously sharp. Ah! After Wu Qingyue heard little Tung Ting's words, he immediately waved his hand in one direction. Crackle! A few black lightning bolts suddenly struck down from a position 2 kilometers away. Roar! After the black lightning struck down, a figure suddenly stopped behind the lightning. After little Tung Tung finished roaring, his vision suddenly darkened, and a huge beast shadow appeared above their heads. "Quick, little uncle, take me to its head." After seeing the giant beast appear, little Tung Tung immediately hugged Lu Tianyu's neck and said to him, "Huh." Lu Tianyu was shocked when he heard his request. That was a level 9 beast. How could they jump on it so casually? Wasn't he afraid that the other party would shake its head and swallow them in one gulp? Hurry up. Listen to me. Or else if your sister runs away, it will be troublesome. She will really become a heartless zombie in the future. Little Tung Tung was a little anxious. Although he had a way to deal with Lu Tianyu, he still had to catch her. If she ran away, as the original dominant consciousness of that body, she would slowly absorb the energy of the body to strengthen her spiritual power, and then gradually suppress Lin Xiao's spiritual consciousness. When one day Lu Tianyu's spiritual power was stronger than Lin Xiao's, she would definitely devour Lin Xiao's spiritual consciousness. But, are you sure it won't eat us in one gulp? Lu Tianyu looked at him in surprise. No. Little uncle, you have to hurry up. Quickly go to its head. I have a way to catch her. Seeing that he didn't believe his words, little Tung Tung immediately patted his shoulder anxiously. Although Lu Tianyi was a little hesitant, seeing that little Ting Tung was so anxious, he could only give it a try. He nervously jumped towards the giant beast. The giant beast was not far above their heads, so Lu Tianyi easily jumped onto the giant beast's claws. Without waiting for him to move, the giant beast raised its claws and sent them to its head. Lu Tianyi held little Ting Tung and jumped onto its head with a strange look on his face. Although he wanted to ask little Ting Tung what was going on, he held back when he thought that he still had urgent matters to attend to. At this time, little Ting Tung lowered his head and cried out to the giant beast, "Aolo! Roar!" After the giant beast let out a slight roar, it turned around and flashed, and its huge body disappeared instantly. Chapter 1450. Zombie Lu Tianyu had just been blocked by Wu Qingyue's lightning, and as soon as she stopped, Wu Qingyue appeared behind her. Wu Qingyue stood in the air behind her. Although his chest was injured, his posture was still straight. A pair of sharp eyes stared at zombie Lu Tianyu on his handsome face, and he suddenly raised a hand and waved it. Roar dash! When Lu Tianyu saw him raise his hand, she knew that he was going to launch an attack. She immediately roared at him and disappeared in a flash. Boom dash! Several lightning bolts fell from the sky almost at the moment she disappeared, striking the place where she disappeared. At this time, zombie Lu Tianyu suddenly appeared behind Wu Qingyue, waving her claws and grabbing at his back. At the same time, there was a black flame on her claws, and as she waved her blade, it slashed towards Wu Qingyue with a black flame. Wu Qingyue dodged in time and avoided her attack. If he was cut by her flaming claws, it would be terrible. Wu Qingyue didn't expect that he would still have the strength of a level 9, but it would be a little tricky to deal with this level 8 zombie emperor. Her speed was so fast that his lightning couldn't hit her, and she could also sneak attack him from behind. Hu dash! Zombie Lu Tianyu saw that she couldn't attack Wu Qingyue and became a little impatient. He roared angrily at Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue noticed that there seemed to be more lines on her face, and both sides of her cheeks were full. Only the area under her nose, around her mouth, and her chin were normal. Roar dash! At this moment, a huge object suddenly appeared above the two of them. A beast roar, with a shock effect, came from above their heads. Pew dash! Both Wu Qingyue and zombie Lu Tianyu were shaken, and there was a huge pain in their heads. Roar dash! At this time, zombie Lu Tianyu suddenly raised her head, stretched her neck, and opened her mouth wide to roar with a ferocious expression. Wu Qingyue spat out another mouthful of blood, and his whole body suddenly withered, and then his body fell directly. Puhuhuhu dash! He fell on a mutant tree on the ground. After zombie Lu Tianyu roared at the sky, her expression suddenly became sluggish. Then, he fell down together with Wu Qingyue. At this moment, Tung Tung suddenly shouted at the giant beast. The giant beast's body flashed and instantly appeared below Lu Tianyu, who was falling. And it happened to catch Lu Tianyu at the position of Tung Tung's head. Quickly catch her. Little Tung Tung immediately reminded Lu Tianyi. When Lu Tianyi suddenly realized that Lu Tianyu was above his head, he subconsciously wanted to catch her. There was no need for little Ting Ting to say anything. After hearing little Ting Ting's words, he grabbed Lu Tianyu's clothes. The next second, his vision blurred, and he suddenly entered Lin Xiao's space.
Splash!
He heard the sound of something falling into the lake. When he turned around, he realized that it was just him and Tung Tung, and they were standing near the lake. You wouldn't have thrown her into the lake, would you? He couldn't help but blurt out. Yes, hurry up.
Throw me down as well.
Little Tung Tung replied, and said to him, "Ah, again?" Lu Tiany's expression was a little stunned for a moment. Yes, hurry up. Hurry. Don't wait until she wakes up, and I can't deal with her. Little Tung Tung patted his arm anxiously with his little hand.
Oh, got it.
Lu Tianyi had no choice but to lift little Tung Tung up, and then threw him into the center of the lake, as if he was throwing something. Splash! After little Tung Tung fell into the water, the pressure in the water immediately disappeared. He moved his limbs at the bottom of the water, and swam quickly like Lu Tianyu, who was sinking into the center of the lake. The energy in the entire lake gathered towards Lu Tianyu's body, trapping her in the middle. At this time, Lu Tianyu's clothes had disappeared, and her naked body was slightly spread out. Her long hair fluttered behind her like seaweed. Her eyes were closed, and the lines on her face had spread to her entire face, and there were also crooked black lines on both sides of her ears to her neck. Just when little Tingting was 3 meters away from her, she suddenly opened her strange, pitch-black eyes that had no white. In an instant, the expression on her face changed. She opened her mouth and bared her teeth, and roared at him with a ferocious face. Roar, however, her voice was restricted in the water, so only her expression could be seen. Lu Tianyu roared as she began to twist her body, but she could only struggle in place, unable to move at all. Little Tung Tung quickly swam behind her like a 4-clawed fish and wrapped his 2 small arms around Lu Tianyu's neck and laid his body on her back. Then, little Tung Tung closed his eyes, and the surrounding energy began to condense towards the 2 of them, finally wrapping them into an energy ball. Roar! After little Tung Tung hugged Lu Tianyu's neck, her face became even more ferocious. Her expression even became a little anxious and flustered. She used both hands to pry little Tung Tung's hands off her neck, but she couldn't. Instead, her sharp fingernails scratched a few bloody marks on little Tung Tung's arms. Although little Tung Tung was in pain, he didn't intend to let go of her. As the energy condensed more and more, Lu Tianyu's movements gradually slowed down. At this time, little Tung Tung immediately began to shout over and over again, "Mama! Mama! Mama!" Roar! Although Lu Tianyu's body movements were much slower, her face became more and more distorted. Her eyes would widen at one moment, and then tightly close the next. Her brows were tightly locked together, and her mouth was sometimes tightly clenched, and sometimes it was open wide. At this time, Lin Xiao was trapped in nothingness, surrounded by darkness, and her whole body was bound by something. She had been to this place before, and she knew what situation she was in now. She appeared here, and her whole body was bound, so she didn't know anything. It seemed that Lu Tianyu's consciousness had already awakened, so she was forced to this place to be suppressed. If she wanted to take back her body, she had to get out of here. However, this invisible binding force was very strong, and it was getting stronger and stronger as time passed. At first, she could still struggle to move her hands and feet, but after a minute or two, she felt that it was getting harder and harder to move. Lin Xiao knew that this would become more and more disadvantageous for her, so she wouldn't give up struggling. She kept trying to twist her body with all her strength, but it didn't have much effect. Until a beast roar suddenly sounded in her ears, and she suddenly found that her whole body was slightly relaxed. She could move. Chapter 1451. The moment she could move, Lin Xiao immediately turned over and stood up. She had been lying down before, but now she could stand up with a slight movement. Although she couldn't see anything under her feet, she felt like she could step on solid ground. Just as she stood up, there was a sudden movement in the space in front of her, and a familiar yet strange aura appeared in front of her. Then, a blurry black shadow also appeared. Roar! As soon as the shadow appeared, it immediately changed into an offensive form and pounced towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao subconsciously wanted to swing her claws, but her limbs felt like they were being bound again, which slowed her movements down a lot. She knew this aura. It was Lu Tianyu's aura. But when Lu Tianyu was awake, she always appeared here. So she had never smelled or felt the other party's aura. But at this moment, she intuitively felt that the aura of the blurry shadow in front of her was Lu Tianyu's. Was this her spiritual consciousness? After realizing this, Lin Xiao instantly knew that this was her chance. If she could defeat this spiritual consciousness here, wouldn't this body belong to her completely? Just as Lin Xiao was thinking, Lu Tianyu's spiritual consciousness was not bound. She moved freely and pounced in front of Lin Xiao. Suddenly, a mouth with a mouthful of black fangs appeared and bit towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao felt a chill on her back, and a sense of crisis suddenly rose in her heart. She faintly felt that if she was bitten by this illusory mouth, things would not be fun. She hurriedly used all her strength to dodge back, but because of the invisible binding on her body, her dodging speed was dozens of times slower. There was no way to avoid being bitten at all. Her vision instantly darkened. At this critical moment, Lin Xiao thought that she would definitely be bitten if she couldn't escape. But at this moment, a familiar and immature voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Mama Lin Xiao was shocked. Suddenly, she saw the shadow in front of her stop. A familiar energy came into her mind from somewhere, and then she felt that the binding on her body was getting lighter and lighter. The shadow of Lu Tianyu's spiritual consciousness seemed to be in an inexplicable state of stillness. Mama, other than little Tingting, there was no one else who could call out her childish voice with her accent. After Lin Xiao heard his voice, she felt the energy of the lake flowing into her mind. As the energy increased, the restraints on her body became lighter and lighter. She quickly responded, not knowing if little Tingting could hear her. However, she still shouted with her mind, "Little Tingting, is that you?" Then she immediately heard Tingting's happy voice, "Mama, it's me. I got your body into the spatial lake, and I'm now controlling the lake's energy to suppress your body. How is Mama doing now?" The zombie's consciousness seemed to have suddenly disappeared. Tingting's voice became a little doubtful when he said the last sentence. As Lin Xiao felt the increasingly intense energy gathering in his mind, he also felt the power in his body increasing. She replied, "Her consciousness is here with me, just about to bite me." But now she was suddenly motionless, and I didn't know what was going on. Was the energy in the lake affecting her consciousness? As the power in her body increased, Lin Xiao immediately retreated. Moreover, she found that she could still move in a small range, so she instantly moved behind the shadow, waved her claws, and fiercely clawed at the illusory shadow. Lin Xiao was not sure if his claws would be able to hurt a spiritual consciousness entity. However, she instinctively wanted to try this method of attack. Puff! When her claws directly cut the shadow, the blurry shadow instantly dissipated. Seeing the shadow dissipate, Lin Xiao didn't immediately relax her vigilance. Instead, he focused all his attention on observing his surroundings. In her mind, Lu Tianyu's spiritual consciousness shouldn't be so easy to deal with. Therefore, even if she succeeded in one strike, she felt that it was impossible to directly destroy Lu Tianyu's consciousness. Thus, she waited for the other party to appear, ready to deal with the other party's sudden attack. However, after waiting for less than 3 seconds, her body suddenly shook, and a clear stream passed through her mind. She only felt her vision blur, and then her whole body relaxed. When she opened her eyes again, she felt that the perception of her body had returned. Unlike when she was in that empty space just now, although she could feel parts of her body, it was a kind of illusory feeling, not the perception of a physical body. Her eyes lit up, and there was still a feeling of strangling her neck. She subconsciously raised her hand to grab what was strangling her neck, only to find that it was a small arm. She immediately turned her head to the side and shouted with her consciousness, "Little Tingting?" The small arm that was tightly strangling her neck instantly loosened, and a small face appeared behind her, looking at her expectantly. "Mama?" After Lin Xiao felt the situation around her, she immediately used her body to absorb the energy of the lake water into her body. Moreover, she felt that her head was still swollen, as if the energy in the lake water could make her feel more comfortable. Her next hunch was not wrong. The energy of the lake water slowly eased the swelling pain in her head. Seeing Lin Xiao absorb and control the energy of the lake water, little Tingting knew that his mission had been completed. He let go of his hand, left a message to Lin Xiao, and swam towards the lake. "Come on, Mama." Lin Xiao was left to desperately absorb the energy to relieve the discomfort in her head and to gradually regain control of her body. Now, not only did her head hurt, but her whole body also felt numb and stiff, as if she had been lying in the same position for a long time without moving. Although she could feel it, her control didn't seem to have fully recovered. So now when she moved her hands and feet, there was a sore, painful, and numb feeling. This feeling was very subtle. She could still accept it if she moved slowly, but if she moved a little more, she would be in tears. It was like being bitten by thousands of ants on her nerves. It was very painful and uncomfortable. Just as she gained more and more control of her body, Lin Xiao felt that she had forgotten something. So, is Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness dead?
Dead, right?
Was he dead? But at this moment, Lin Xiao couldn't feel the existence of another spiritual consciousness in her body at all, so her body was stiff, as if it was being bitten by ants. So, was Lu Tianyu's zombie consciousness dead or not? Chapter 1452. The energy in the lake gradually filled her mind, surrounding her corpse core and slowly seeping in. Before this, the energy in the lake would not enter her corpse core. It would only fill her entire body and help her recover. Now, the energy began to seep into her corpse core and was repelled by the black energy in the corpse core. However, although the black energy in her corpse core repelled the green energy in the lake, it was not the kind of rejection that was aggressive, but defensive. Therefore, Lin Xiao did not feel a headache, only that her corpse core was a little swollen. At this time, Lu Tianyi, who was on the shore, saw Ting Ting suddenly emerge from the lake after waiting for a few days. Then, he quickly swam towards the shore like a puppy. Lu Tianyi immediately stepped into the water to pick him up. Now that the energy in the lake had gathered at the bottom of the lake, the pressure on the surface of the lake had completely disappeared. Therefore, Lu Tianyi could get close to the water to pick up Tung Tung. Quick, let's go out first. Tung Tung was picked up by him, no longer caring about his naked body. After saying this to Lu Tianyi, the two of them flashed and disappeared into the space. The people who had been waiting in Huaxia for a few days under the pressure of the huge beast, after seeing Tung Tung and Lu Tianyi suddenly appear, they all breathed a sigh of relief. This was because after the effect of the medicine on Wu Qingyue and the others wore off, their abilities had fallen back to their original level. Fortunately, the flying beast did not start to attack Huaxia after that. Even Dong Xiaowei, who was at level 9, seemed to have lost interest. But as long as it was still here, no one could relax. Daddy, take some high-level energy cores. I will send you into the space. You go to the lake to find Mama. After Tung Tung came out, he let Lu Tianyi carry him to Wu Qingyue's side, and then he whispered to Wu Qingyue. How is your mama? Wu Qingyue first asked him expectantly, then looked at him doubtfully. You want energy cores? Tung Tung said, Go quickly, Mama has succeeded. But there is still one step left, which is to absorb the energy in the energy core. After saying that, he disappeared into the space with Wu Qingyue, leaving a large group of people outside with confused expressions. Everyone looked at the place where they disappeared, and then looked up at the giant beast floating quietly above their heads. His face was filled with confusion and anxiety. Why did he go in again? What about this big guy? He went in again. When would he come out? Don't tell me I have to wait a few more days? Why did you go in again? Lan Lu was the first one who could not help but appear beside Lu Tianyi. He looked at Lu Tianyi, who was left outside, and asked. Lu Tianyi looked at him and heaved a sigh of relief. Don't worry, he should be out soon. Before he could finish, little Tung Tung's figure appeared from where he had disappeared. However, this time, there was no one to hug him. Therefore, as soon as it appeared, it immediately fell to the ground. Fortunately, Lu Tianyi reacted in time and bent down to catch him. Seeing that there were outsiders around, little Tung Tung didn't say anything. He just patted Lu Tianyi with his hand and pointed to the top of a very tall building. Lu Tianyi immediately understood what he meant. With a few leaps, he flew to the top of the building with little Tung Tung in his arms. After little Tung Tung reached the top of the building, the huge head of the giant beast immediately leaned towards him. Lu Tianyi carried little Tung Tung again and jumped onto the head of the giant beast. Aya! Little Tung Tung cried out on top of the giant beast's head. Everyone watched as the giant beast turned around and slowly flew towards the south. After its huge body slowly flew far away, it left behind the ruins of the base in Huaxia. All right, they're finally gone this time. But where are they going? Don't tell me that direction is the base? Seeing the giant beast's huge body getting further and further away, Lan Lu finally let out a long sigh of relief. Wei Haichao appeared beside him and said, "That direction is probably right. But what about the other two? Is it okay for that kid to bring this level 9 giant beast home?" Lan Lu shrugged and said, "What's wrong with it? Didn't you see that the giant beast became obedient after he came? Now that he brought it back, it would probably have the same status as a divine beast guarding the mountain." Wei Haichao revealed a complicated expression. That's true. Looking back at the construction situation of the base in Huaxia, it was really tragic. In the end, the culprit was subdued by a baby who was only a few months old and was even brought home to look after the house. Who would dare to provoke the base in the future? Not only was it a zombie base now, but it was also a giant beast base. A roar could kill all of you. Unfortunately, this kind of divine beast was not something that they could subdue. I'm more curious about what's going on with Lu Tianyu now, but looking at the little kid's expression, it should be solved. Lan Lu's eyes revealed a light of interest. Now that Wu Qingyue has also gone in, it shouldn't be long before he comes out. After Wei Haichao said that, he turned around and began to send people out to clean up the mess. At this time, after Wu Qingyue was thrown into the lake by Xiao Tingting, his clothes and other things were directly turned into energy. Only a pile of level 7 and 8 energy cores and corpse cores that he carried with him had not been melted. These were all assets that he wanted to hand over to Lin Xiao, but she refused to accept them. He didn't expect to finally use them now. The lake had now become much clearer, and the light was many times brighter than before. The distance that could be seen had also been extended. Soon, he saw a human body in the center of the lake, with a head of long black hair that spread out like seaweed. He swam toward the other party and looked at her body and face with closed eyes at a close distance. The black lines on her face had disappeared, and she had returned to her clean and fair face. The devilish body protection hadn't changed. Her slender limbs, towering snow-white breasts, slender waist, and the faint grass below. It could make any man's blood boil, and he couldn't help it. At this moment, the other party's closed eyes suddenly opened. Her eyes were still filled with black, without any white in them. She opened her eyes and looked at him, then blinked again. Then, she turned her eyes and glanced at the energy cores that were shining in different colors floating around him. Following her gaze, Wu Qingyue raised his hands and grabbed the energy cores and corpse cores beside him. He swam his legs and swam in front of her, then held a pile of energy cores in front of her with both hands. Lin Xiao looked at the handsome face and the deep eyes of the man in front of her. After a moment of silence, she raised her hand and gently touched the energy cores on his body. Dozens of energy cores of different colors immediately formed a circle around their waists, and dozens of different energies began to flow into their bodies. Lin Xiao raised her hand slightly and moved it to Wu Qingyue's neck. Her alluring body also moved closer, and her beautiful cherry lips curled into a smile. Then, she kissed the other party's beautiful lips. Chapter 1453. After Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue went ashore, Wu Qingyue couldn't help but ask, "What's a level 9 zombie called?" Level 8 was considered a zombie emperor, so what was a level 9 called? After Lin Xiao went ashore, she waved her hand, and the black mist wrapped around her body. Then, it quickly turned into a set of black clothes. She stood on the shore of the lake, turned around, and pushed her palm in the direction of the lake. The energy in the lake quickly floated up, forming a dark green energy mist that fluttered up and down along with her good movements. Finally, she didn't have to go into the water to help others level up, because now she could help others level up on the shore. I don't know, maybe it should be called a super zombie? She gently waved her hand, and the dark green energy mist on the surface of the lake was swept into the water. Then, she looked at Wu Qingyue and said, Wu Qingyue didn't have the ability to wear his ability like clothes, so he stood there naked. He looked at Lin Xiao and said, It's quite suitable for this nickname, because the strength of the two of them was somewhat reversed. Although they went through some combination exercise in the lake and absorbed a large amount of energy, they had directly leveled up. However, in the same level, he was still suppressed by Lin Xiao's aura. Even if he was a real level 9 lightning ability user, his aura was still weaker than Lin Xiao's. If the two of them fought in the future, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to beat her. I feel that the current level 9 and level 8 are two completely different concepts. Let's go out and find a place to try. Lin Xiao suddenly stared at him, her eyes full of eagerness. Wu Qingyue, if he were to give it a try, would he be beaten black and blue and go back? How about it? Lin Xiao looked at him with a smile. Wu Qingyue sighed. What are you looking at? Can you give me a set of clothes first? At least give me a pair of underwear. Lin Xiao subconsciously looked down, and her face suspiciously turned red. However, just as she was about to turn around and walk toward the small building, she suddenly stopped in her tracks when she shifted her gaze away from the building. Wu Qingyue saw her strange expression and turned his head to look at where she was looking. In the end, he saw a large area of green, all kinds of green. So green that the 3 small buildings were covered with melon vines? Or bean vine. The neatly trimmed vegetable, wheat, rice fields, and even the catnip field on the other side of the field were overgrown by the plants. It was packed to the brim. He turned around and looked at the lawn on the other side of the lake. Sure enough, the grass there was also very lush. The area was so vast that one couldn't see the end of it. It was a vast expanse of green. He turned his head to look at the strange forest, and above his head, as expected, the trees grew several times taller, and the fog in the sky became thinner. Originally, the light in the entire space was dim, but now it had become very bright. It was like the brightness of a cloudy day without the sun. In short, the area of the entire space had expanded by who knew how many times. It seemed like it was affected by Lin Xiao's advancement. Lin Xiao's figure disappeared in a flash. 3 seconds later, she reappeared. She held a set of men's clothes in her hand and handed it to Wu Qingyue. Let's go out. After watching Wu Qingyue put on his clothes, Lin Xiao muttered. She didn't even use her hands to grab Wu Qingyue, but the two of them disappeared from the space, just like that. Just after the two of them left the space, 2 different types of level 9 auras immediately spread. Wei Haichao, Han Xiao, Lu Jinan, and Hong Yijie, the 4 remaining directors of the base in China, instantly appeared. They surrounded the rooftops below Lin Xiao and Han Xiao and looked up at the two of them with a confused face. By the way, what's going on with you guys? Didn't the effect of the drug already pass? How did you guys rise up again? Wei Haichao stared at the two of them and asked in disbelief. He remembered that they didn't give them a second drug. How did they suddenly become level 9? And what's going on with this female zombie? Didn't they say that the drug was ineffective? Could it be that it would only take effect after a few days? Oh, there was an accident. It looks like you guys are done here. The rest is up to you guys. We still have things to do, so that's it for now. Wu Qingyue said to Wei Haichao with a smile. Wei Haichao opened his mouth, but the two of them standing in the air didn't give him a chance to speak. In an instant, they disappeared from the spot. At this time, in the universal base, a huge beast was slowly circling in the air 1,000 meters above the ground. There was a small figure sitting on its head, patting the beast's head from time to time and talking to it. In a lounge on the ground, a group of women were chatting leisurely. Lin Wenwen stretched out her hands to support herself on the windowsill and poked her head out to look at the giant beast above her head. She couldn't help but say, if this guy keeps circling like this, who would dare to come to our base? Xin Yuzhen laughed and asked her, are you hoping that people will come? Or don't want people to come? Long Qingying stood next to Lin Wenwen and leaned against the window frame, looking outside with an indifferent face and said, it can't keep flying up there. It has to come down to rest. I don't know when Leader and Old Wu will come back. Come back and take this big guy away. Although it can be used to guard the base, it's also very scary. They didn't know when Qiu Lily appeared among them, standing on the other side of the window and also poking her head out. Everyone turned around, and after seeing Chiu Lily, they asked her curiously, "Huh? Aren't you with your big Black Panther? It's rare to see you alone." Chiu Lily frowned and said with her cheeks puffed up, "He's busy. He doesn't have time to talk to me. I'm like an invisible person beside him." Now that the base had gone through the incident in China, and the fact that the zombie army had been exposed, this base still needed a lot of work. Moreover, their leader was currently not in the base. The new rules of the base had been established, and the large amount of planting at the plantation could not be left behind. The safety of the humans and zombies circulating between the first and second bases needed to be taken care of first and second. These were all things that needed to be taken care of first. As for the problem of the enemy, it was no longer important. Now, they just needed to wait for their leader to come back. The situation was settled. At least from now on, the relationship between their base's agricultural products and the other bases had eased. Just when Xiedong, Lin Feng, and the other people in the base began to reorganize the base under the pressure of the giant beast, two powerful level 9 auras suddenly appeared in the sky above the base. Everyone in the base was shocked. They're back. Chapter 1454. One day, 3 years later, Lin Hao found Lu Tiany's office. When he saw the child on the sofa, he immediately pointed at him and shouted, "Wu Cheating, come over here." An adorable 3-year-old child on the sofa slid down from the chair in an instant and ran towards Lu Tiany, who was on the other side of the desk. He cried out, "Aw, little uncle, save me." As he shouted, he immediately lay on Lu Tiany's lap. Lu Tiany raised his head and said to Lin Hao, who was at the door, "Keep quiet in the office. Don't be so irritable, Dean Lin." Lin Hao's handsome face was a little ferocious. He pointed at the child and said angrily, "This little bastard actually stuffed a woman into my bed again. She's still not wearing her clothes. If I hadn't discovered it in time, this child would have succeeded. I can't take responsibility for ruining the girl's reputation." Lu Tiany couldn't help but laugh. At this time, the child had already climbed into Lu Tiany's arms and shrunk into his stomach. He weakly shouted to Lin Hao, "Second uncle. If you don't find me an aunt, do you want to find me an uncle, uncle? Why does it sound so weird? A male aunt?" When he said the last sentence, little Tung Tung himself was confused. Well, if his second uncle found a male aunt, then it would be fine. Is that something a little brat like you should care about? You little bastard. Come here. Don't think that I can't do anything to you if you hide in Lu Tiany's place. Lin Hao walked in angrily. Lu Tiany looked at little Tung Tung, amused. "Little Tung Tung, which girl did you send to his bed this time? Haven't the previous few lessons not been enough?" As he spoke, he patted little Tung Tung's head. Little Tung Tung turned around and hugged Lu Tiany's waist. He turned back and said to Lin Hao, "I thought about it for a long time this time. I think Sister Jiang Anan is very suitable for second uncle." "No, we're not suitable at all. No, we're not suitable at all." Two voices of protest rang out at the same time. Lin Hao, Lu Tiany, and Tung Tung looked towards the door. Jiang Anan stood there. The bangs that used to cover half of her face had been tied to the back, revealing the right side of her face. The scar on the right side of his face had now become a faint mark. Although objectively speaking, it still affected her beautiful face. Compared to her previous appearance, it was much better. At this moment, she was standing at the door with a straight face, staring sharply at Ting Ting. This child actually dared to drug her and throw her onto Lin Hao's bed. She and Lin Hao originally had nothing to do with each other. Lin Wenwen and Long Qingying walked in and said to Ting Ting with a smile, "Ting Ting, why don't you send me to your Uncle Yuan's bed? You care so much about your uncle. Why don't you care about me?" However, little Tung Ting said to her with a look of disgust, "You stare at Uncle Yuan every day. Now, Uncle Yuan wants to run away when he sees you, okay? Besides, if you let go a little and directly pounce on him, Uncle Yuan may not be your opponent. It's you who's been hesitating for 3 years, but you don't dare to make a move." After the 3 women came in, 2 little girls stuck their heads in from behind. Lin Wenwen immediately coughed dryly and shifted his gaze to the ceiling. Cough. and Lin Hao continued to deal with him. We didn't see anything. Little Tingting. He already ran here, and Uncle Lu is protecting him. Second uncle can't deal with him. Lin Xiaolu, who had grown into a little girl, continued to stretch her neck and leaned on the door frame. She couldn't help but interrupt. Wu Yueling, who was below her, nodded in agreement. Lu Tianyi, hand him over. If you didn't spoil him every day, would he be so lawless? Lin Hao stood in front of Lu Tianyi's desk and stared at Lu Tianyi. This kid was holding little Tingting and sitting there motionlessly. He couldn't forcibly snatch it away. If Lu Tianyi didn't spoil this little brat to the heavens, would he want to send women to his bed for no reason? And although it wasn't the first time little Tingting did this kind of thing, thinking about how his parents got together in this way, the more he thought about it, the more he wanted to be beaten. This is my nephew. So, what if I spoil him? All right, you're an adult. Why bother with the brat? Besides, you angered him. Next time he might send you a mutated female gorilla to your bed. Lu Tianyi looked at him gloatingly. Lin Hao's expression suddenly looked like he was constipated. Lin Wenwen, Lin Xiaolu, and the other girls seemed to have thought of something and couldn't help but laugh. At this time, Shun Yuzhen came over with some documents. After knocking on the door, she looked curiously at the group of people in the room. They're all here? As a result, when she came in, she saw little Tingting hugging Lu Tianyi's waist, and then looked at Lin Hao, who had a strange expression on his face. She immediately understood and said, "Little Tingting, what did you do to your uncle again?" "No, what I did was clearly a good thing," little Tingting said stubbornly. Shun Yuzhen walked over with a smile and put the documents in her hands in front of Lu Tianyi's table. "If it was a good thing, your uncle's expression wouldn't be like that. Be careful, if you anger him, he'll get your mom to deal with you." Little Tingting said calmly, "My mom doesn't have time to care about me now. Recently, she's already busy enough with the expansion of the base. What's more, there's a dad who wants her to give me a younger brother and sister every day pestering her. If you don't cause trouble all day, you'll be itching all over." Lin Hao's expression changed again and again as he said to him in a bad mood. "All right, apologize to sister, and next time, at least let the girl be willing. This isn't right. If the girl was willing, your uncle would definitely be overjoyed. But now, Anan isn't willing, so he's angry. Oh, by the way, do you think your mama can really give birth to a younger brother or sister for you?" Lu Tianyi first said a bunch of things to little Tingting and then brought Lin Xiao over. "Sister and I'm sorry. Next time when you like my uncle, I'll send you to his bed." Little Tingting obediently apologized first, but the next sentence made Jiang and Lin Hao want to vomit blood. Lu Tianyi. Little Tingting continued to say, "Mama's body is fine, but Papa needs to work harder. But recently I always feel that his waist isn't good." On the other side, Wu Qingyue suddenly sneezed. He looked left and right, then wiped his nose and said to Xiao Yunlong, "It's only been 3 years and old Zhou can't stand it anymore. I've been in charge for 7 years. Chapter 1455. After 3 years, Qingshan Base finally moved from the barren northwest to the central region. Since Sentient Base was the first, Qingshan Base quickly announced the existence of the zombies, becoming the second zombie base. Moreover, it had also become a cooperative base with the all-life base. For the celebration banquet for the relocation of the base, the people in charge of each base brought people and gifts. Apart from the low-profile Meng clan, who only brought gifts, all the other bases sent people. Wei Haichao from Huaxia was the representative. Kong Qingming, who had been promoted to level 7 from Ocean City. Yuan Tianqing from Universal Base was accompanied by Wu Qingyue, Lin Wenwen, and the others. Although Wu Qingyue was with the people of the Universal Life Base, he also represented Sea City. Because, boss, if you don't agree to that, I think old Zhou is going to flip out. When he does, just you wait. Don't think that no one can deal with you just because you are level 9. At the beginning of the banquet, Kong Qingming first toasted the people from Qingshan Base, then immediately sat next to Wu Qingyue with a glass of wine. Wu Qingyue said calmly, "What's the hurry? The entire ocean city is not as important as my third child. I won't go back until I get my third child out. Kong Qingming looked at him speechlessly and said, "If you don't go back, I think old Zhou will abduct your 2 children." The 2 children he was referring to were Wu Yueling and Wu Cheating. After all, although Zhou sure we liked to focus on research, if he was angry, you might be fine, but you would be out of luck. After Wu Qingyue threw Ocean City to him, he didn't want to do it after managing it for 3 months. All kinds of miscellaneous affairs in the base made him so busy that he didn't have time to do research. As a scholar, he couldn't do his favorite research and had to manage the government affairs of the base, which he was not good at.
It was a torture for him.
So after getting rid of Xigong Chen, the level 9 giant beast, and the underground creatures, he sent someone to find Wu Qingyue, asking him to come back and take over Ocean City. In the end, Wu Qingyue was trying hard to have another child with Lin Xiao, but after 3 years, there was no progress. Lin Wenwen, Lin Hao, Little Tingting, and the others had been waiting for news from the beginning. After waiting for 3 years, all of them no longer had any hope. Lin Xiao wasn't anxious about this matter at all. When the time came, the child would naturally come. When the time came, he wouldn't be able to force it. She found it funny that the others were more anxious than she was. Hearing Kong Qingming's words, Wu Qingyue said indifferently, "It doesn't matter. Old Zhou is quite lonely. It's good to let the 2 children accompany him occasionally. Besides, it's not the first time he's kidnapped the 2 children." Kong Qingming. The attitude of these 2 leaders was very tiring. They felt that the position of the leader of Sea City had suddenly become as cheap as cabbages. Oh, that's not right. Cabbages nowadays are expensive. Especially the cabbages produced by Sentient Base. They were sweet and delicious. It was greener and healthier than the cabbages that were sprayed with various pesticides and hormones before the apocalypse. Most of the food at the banquet was provided by the Universal Base. Lan Lu also took out a large number of all kinds of wine that the base had collected in the past to entertain everyone. So at night, most of them returned to the reception room drunk with the smell of alcohol. At this time, in order not to waste the precious wine, everyone didn't use their abilities to dissolve the wine essence. Instead, they let the alcohol naturally and slowly digest in their bodies. Yuan Tianxing had just come out of the bathroom reeking of alcohol. He had a new towel wrapped around his waist and walked out while drying his hair. Bang! Suddenly, his door was violently pushed open, and a short-haired woman staggered in with a bottle of wine in her hand. Yuan Tianxing stopped what he was doing. His hand was still holding the towel to his hair. He looked at the drunkard who walked in with a puzzled expression. "Lin Wenwen, did you drink all the wine in Lanlu? Why are you so drunk?" Lin Wenwen staggered left and right as she walked in. She raised the wine bottle in her hand, then frowned and stared at Yuan Tianxing without making a sound. Yuan Tianxing looked at her with a subtle expression, then raised his hand and gently waved in front of her. He said, "Hello, hello? Do you still recognize me?" Lin Wenwen suddenly grabbed his hand that was waving in front of her, and then bang! Smashed the wine bottle in her hand on the ground. Yuan Tianxing was stunned by her drunken appearance. He glanced at the wine bottle on the ground. He looked up again. Lin Wenwen tore off her shirt and stared at Yuan Tianxing fiercely, as if she was staring at some prey. After taking off her coat, she took off her vest, revealing the chest tattoo inside. Hey. Stop. What are you doing?" Seeing this woman actually take off her clothes in front of him, Yuan Tianxing was stunned for 2 or 3 seconds before he reacted. "Pooh, it's starting." At this time, a very small voice suddenly came from the door. Yuan Tianxing turned his head and saw 2 heads poking out from under the door frame. He immediately pointed at them and shouted, Quick! What are you 2 looking at? Hurry up and stop her." Why the hell were they watching the scene? Well, only you can stop this. We're just here to see what's going on. You guys do your thing, we're leaving, bye. Xiao Lily and Jiang Anan silently retreated, and at the same time, closed the door. Hey! Yuan Tianxing looked at the closed door with a dumbfounded look, and when he turned back again, he could not help but be blinded.
All right,
Just as he was talking to the two guys at the door, Lin Wenwen had already taken off her clothes. Did she have to be so fast? Lin Wenwen still did not speak, but she stared at Yuan Tianqing and walked towards him. Stop, stop, stop. Stop right there. Lin Wenwen, wake up. Yuan Tianqing saw her walking towards him so ferociously and could not help but step back. Why did he have a premonition that his chastity was going to be lost? This girl was drunk and wanted to force herself on him. What should he do? He could not beat her now, although after 3 years of recuperation, his body had indeed recovered a lot. However, his arcana had only been restored to level 3, and there was no way he could fight Lin Wenwen, who had a level 7 arcana. Moreover, Lin Wenwen's second arcana had been raised to level 4, and her dimensional arcana was level 7, and she had even unlocked a new skill. It was the ability to freeze space in a small area, and within this frozen area, only she could move. So, Yuan Tianqing did not even take a few steps back before he was frozen. Then, he was carried to the bed like a princess. Princess hug. The next day, after dawn, Lin Wenwen woke up slightly, and she felt a dull pain in her head. Pressing her forehead with her hand, she endured the headache and sat up, but the moment she sat up, she suddenly froze. She looked down at her chest, and it was completely bare. Her heart went cold. At this time, she could feel a source of human warmth beside her leg, and the smooth touch of human skin stuck to her thigh. Lin Wenwen turned her head to look. 10 seconds later, Yuan Tianqing finally could not help but open his eyes, and with one hand supporting his head, he silently looked at Lin Wenwen, who was half-dressed and holding her coat, trying to quietly open the door and slip away. Are you going to run away after you finish eating? Lin Wenwen, who had just opened the door a little, froze and maintained a sneaky posture. She turned her head around mechanically and looked at Yuan Tianqing awkwardly. I don't remember what happened last night. Can I pretend that it didn't happen? She really did not remember anything, and she was the one who was at a disadvantage. Yuan Tianqing stood up from the bed, and with his 2 strong and slender legs, he walked toward her. Seeing the 2 kilograms of meat dangling from his crotch, Lin Wenwen could not help but close her eyes and turn her face away. Yuan Tianqing stood in front of her. He reached out and pushed the door open, closing it with a small gap. Then, he held the door with his hand and pulled Lin Wenwen's body back, trapping her face between the door and his chest, and looked down at her with a smile. Since you've already finished eating, how can you not be responsible to the end? There's no free lunch in this world. With that said, he lifted her chin with his fingers and gently bit her lips. Lin Wenwen was stunned at first, and then her beautiful eyes suddenly widened. Then, her eyes gradually became moist, and a glint of tears appeared. All right, don't cry.
I know how you've always felt about me.
If I really had no feelings for you at all, do you really think you could have succeeded last night? I didn't expect you to have this kind of hobby when you're drunk. Yuan Tianqing seemed to have thought of something, and then his smiling eyes flashed with interest. What hobby? What else did I do? After hearing Yuan Tianqing's words, Lin Wenwen's tears flowed uncontrollably. She even spoke with a nasal voice. Yuan Tianqing was right. If she hadn't drugged Yuan Tianqing, then he wouldn't have been able to get hard when he didn't have feelings for her, right? So, what exactly did she do last night? You did something very interesting. And you can slowly think about it in the future. Now, let's continue what we did last night. Do you know how uncomfortable it feels to stop halfway? Yuan Tianqing smiled at her and kept her in suspense. At the end, he actually had a look of resentment on his face. With that said, he lowered his head again and kissed Lin Wenwen's lips fiercely. His tongue directly burrowed into her mouth, which was still full of the taste of alcohol, and tangled with her tongue forcefully. This woman was drunk and crazy last night, teasing him until he wanted to die. But at the last moment, she suddenly fell, lying on top of him, and fell asleep. Moreover, she had even knocked her forehead against his. Now that he felt it, there must be a bruise. Lin Wenwen's delicate face still had 2 streaks of tears, and she couldn't help but wrap her arms around his neck from Yuan Tianqing's kiss. Chapter 1456. On the way back from Qingshan Base, Wu Qingyue sat in the same car as Yuan Tianqing. I heard you were pushed down. How was it? Is a force melon sweet? Wu Qingyue asked Yuan Tianqing with a smile. Yuan Tianqing gave him a similar smile. Didn't you get raped before? What do you think? Wu Qingyue said. Seeing how happy you are, it must be sweet. Then, he turned to the driver and said, Stop the car, let him out. The driver was speechless. Yuan Tianqing continued to smile and said, Your car is behind. This seems to be my car. Wu Qingyue was speechless. Then stop the car and let me out. As the driver, Yuanqing said helplessly, All right, stop fooling around. Can't you let me drive properly? The two who felt like they were very childish were speechless. Yuan Tianqing said with a smile, If you don't go back and clean up the mess in Haiqing, old Zhou won't just kidnap Tingting and Lingling. I think he'll kidnap the big one. Wu Qingyue looked at him in confusion. Why would he kidnap my big one? Yuan Tianqing said, He wants to use the land outside Haiqing to exchange for the purifying potion. Lin Xiao seems to have agreed. Why, you don't know. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face faded. I really don't know. Do they only know how to play with land? After 3 years of relatively stable development, the agricultural area of Haiqing Base was getting bigger and bigger. This was to meet the needs of the major bases. However, the total population of Qingshan, Haiqing, Heilong, and even China and Meng tribe was about 3 million. After 3 years, the population of Base 1 had increased, and the zombie army of Base 2 had tripled. But even so, there was still a lack of manpower in the fields. It was too difficult to supply the major bases. Therefore, Lin Xiao planned to let Haiqing plan it themselves. Therefore, such an important technical secret was handed over to Haiqing. If they didn't find a reliable person to manage the entire Haiqing, it wouldn't be long before it would be chaotic again. So, the leader actually wants you to go back, right? After all, you're always at her house. It's very annoying. Yuan Tianqing said. Wu Qingyue said unwillingly, But if I go back to High City, won't the chances of my third child be even lower? Yuan Tianqing really wanted to roll his eyes at him. That depends on fate. When it's supposed to come, it will come. If you don't have this fate, what can you do even if you fuck her? Wu Qingyue's face darkened. What the hell is? The more I look at this man, the more I hate him. He dared to curse him in front of him. After Yuan Tianqing returned to the base, Lin Feng saw him and said, I can finally go home. Lin Hao immediately corrected himself. Brother-in-law. Lin Xiao looked at him and smiled meaningfully. Yo, brother-in-law. Don't make my Wenwen angry in the future, or I'll teach you a lesson. Then, she cracked her knuckles and continued, My status is different, so my treatment will be different. Yuan Tianqing, when he saw that there were twice as many documents and work on his desk, he finally understood what Lin Xiao meant by my status is different, so my treatment will be different. Contrary to Yuan Tianqing's situation, old Wu really didn't expect to be chased out by his wife as soon as he got home. Go back to your high city and be your leader. Don't be a hindrance in front of me all day. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and turned to leave. Back then, she said that he didn't want to be a leader. Why did he come to her place and idle around all day? Now, the more she looked at him, the more annoyed she was. Wu Qingyue. He could only pack up and go back to High City. What else could he do? How could he dare to disobey the Queen's orders? On the other hand, after Kong Qingming returned to the base, he went to the medical department. When will he wake up? Kong Qingming looked at the man lying on the bed in the ICU and asked Emily next to him. Emily said, The poison in his body is almost cleared, but when he will wake up depends on his own will. At this moment, a few people walked over from the corridor. 4 of them walked over in a formation in the middle. The man walking in the middle had a face full of stubble and was wearing loose clothes. He walked over with a gloomy look on his face. You're here? After seeing the man with the stubble, Kong Qingming nodded at him. It was none other than Li Yueshan, and the person lying in the ward was Li Yuehe, whom Kong Qingming had saved. What's your decision? This is the last time you're coming to see your brother, right? If you don't agree, you won't be able to see him in the future, Kong Qingming said while looking at him. Li Yueshan walked to his side and looked inside through the isolation glass. Staring at his sleeping brother, he nodded after a while. I agree. Kong Qingming raised his hand and patted his shoulder. Wouldn't it be better if you agreed earlier? Why wait until now? Although the mission is very dangerous, if you don't come back, your brother won't stop taking the medicine. He will wake up one day. Li Yueshan shook his head and said, No, I didn't agree. I just wanted to see him a few more times and see if his condition has improved. Now that he's getting better, I can go down with peace of mind. His mission was actually not difficult. It was just to go down to the underground space with the others to collect medicinal ingredients. The reason why the level 9 giant beast left was because it couldn't stay down there any longer. There was a large amount of poisonous gas in that space, and all kinds of mutated plants. It was very dangerous. Almost every time this mission was sent down, only 15% of the people came back. Most of them would never come back. Therefore, the cadres of Sea City discussed and decided that this kind of mission was to find some special criminals to go down. Whether they could come back successfully or not, it would be their punishment and redemption. Then there was Mo Yen. Lin Xiao didn't fulfill his promise to kill Sikong Chen, so he could only give him another condition. Then, he helped the beauty behind him recover her voice. But after Lin Xiao recovered her voice, he looked at the two of them with a strange gaze. Mo Yen felt his hair stand on end. What are you looking at? Lin Xiao glanced at the beauty next to him and smiled. Nothing. She really didn't expect that the beauty in the white dress who always followed Mo Yen. After taking off her clothes, she was shocked by the fact that there was a cross-dressing boss among the zombies. What made her even more shocked was that Mo Yen didn't know her real gender. This joke would make Lin Xiao laugh at him for a year. Because Mo Yen had always liked beautiful women. It was because he saw that he was a beautiful woman that he kept him by his side. In the end, yes. She actually kept her secret and stayed by Mo Yan's side. She probably really loved Mo Yan. Although Lin Xiao really wanted to help the beauty keep her secret, Mo Yan wasn't a simple person. Seeing Lin Xiao's strange gaze, he was already suspicious. Therefore, he started to ask Lin Xiao what that gaze was and what it represented. If she didn't answer, he would tease the girls around her every day. Everyone was so angry that they fought with him every day. Lin Xiao couldn't take it anymore and could only tell him the truth. Seeing Mo Yan's expression as if he was struck by lightning, Lin Xiao held back her laughter and said, You told me to say this. I told you that telling you wouldn't be a good thing. Mo Yan was shocked for a full 10 seconds, then he suddenly turned around and disappeared. 2 days later, when Lin Xiao met him again, the way he looked at him was even weirder than the last time. I'm going to go blind. You're actually a submissive. Mo Yan was speechless. He really wanted to die. What should he do? The anger of being lied to made him directly rush to find the other party and ask for an explanation. In the end, he was suppressed by the other party. Moreover, he had suddenly grown to be as tall as him, and his body was even more sturdy than his. What was going on? And he was even stronger than him. Why did this man disguise himself as a woman who was weaker than him, shorter than him, and prettier than him to hide by his side? Because it's true love. I think he's very loyal to you. Lin Xiao stabbed a 40-meter-long broadsword into the ground. Mo Yan was speechless. He vomited blood and died. Next was Duan Wan. One day, she met Xiao Liqing's team on a mission. Xiao Liqing and the others were in a posture that was unbearable to look at. All of them were poisoned by a strange mutated flower. Even Lin Xiao's lake water antidote couldn't completely cure them. Fortunately, their lives were saved, but it left a subtle side effect. So when Duan Wan and the others met them, these big men were hugging a tree or hugging each other, tearing off their clothes, kissing, and twisting around. Duan Wan and the others covered their eyes in unison and looked away. It's too painful. After that, they couldn't help but laugh and even took out their phones to take videos of them. I didn't expect Xiao Liqing, who usually looks so ordinary, to be so attractive when he's blushing. Looking at Xiao Liqing's blushing face, his thin lips slightly open and his half-closed eyes' blurry expression, Duanwan felt that a switch in her heart had been turned on, and an impulse suddenly appeared. What should we do? The assistant next to her came over to look at her. Duanwan quickly put away her drooling expression and pretended to be serious and said, "Let's take out our antidote and let them try it first. If it doesn't work, then we'll knock them out. I don't think they'll be in this state forever. They'll be fine after the effect is over."
Oh.
The assistant did as she said and turned to see her supporting Xiao Liqing to the side. "Captain, where are you going?" Duanwan turned to look at Xiao Liqing's face and then smiled slightly.
"Take him to detoxify."
The assistant looked puzzled and asked the companion next to him, "Why can the others detoxify on the spot, but Captain Xiao has to take him somewhere else?" The companion next to him also looked puzzled and shook his head. "I don't know." An hour later, the assistant. "It took an hour to detoxify the poison? How did they detoxify the poison?" The companion. He seemed to have guessed something, but he didn't know if he should say it. When Xiao Liqing came back, his expression had returned to normal. However, if one observed carefully, they would find that he had been maintaining a subtle distance from Duanwan. Duanwan didn't care, but she would occasionally smile at him. Xiao Liqing's heart was breaking down. Damn it, he was forcefully pushed down by a woman who was secretly sadistic. What could he say? Could he shout? He wanted his face. And why did the women in the base love to forcefully push down men? Was this a contagious disease? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.